Chapter 133. In front of the campsite, the offensive and defensive positions had changed. Spinning arrows covered the forest like a torrential downpour, their momentum even overshadowing the whistling of the cold wind. The Gray army had launched a rocket attack at the beginning, and they had occasionally counterattacked later on. Now, they were completely suppressed under the bunkers and could not even lift their heads. Thud, thud, thud. Cough, cough, F asterisk CKU. Darren waved his hand to disperse the flying sawdust and said gloomily, "Indeed, comparisons are odious. Look at the rain of arrows. Uncle Darren, with our equipment, it's good enough that we can launch a few sneak attacks." Josiah also crouched behind the tree trunk and then said worriedly, "I wonder how Dunn is doing. Did he find the granary?" Naturally, no one dared to poke their heads out to observe such a powerful attack. "This is simple." Darren took out a small knife, and with the injection of his red combat energy, he dug a small gap in the tree trunk. When Borg saw this, he immediately moved his head over, and his expression changed drastically. "Oh no, what's the matter?" Josiah asked in shock. Borg moved aside and said hatefully, "This idiot. This guy's defense is quite good." Darren immediately moved his head over. It turned out that half of the fire in the sky had been extinguished. The remaining fire was also being suppressed by the waves of sand raised by the soldiers, and it looked like it was about to be completely extinguished. Impossible. How can it be so fast? Where did the sand come from? Of course, there were no fire extinguishers in the alternate world. Their methods of extinguishing fire were more primitive, either flooding or covering with soil. However, no matter which method it was, time was needed to prepare. Now that the fire was under control so quickly, it could only mean that the other party had already prepared the sand. It was no wonder that Borg changed the way he addressed him. He could not help but praise this commander's defensive skills. In fact, it was indeed so. Some generals could not attack, but it did not mean that they could not do other things. For example, although the commander in front of him was not very quick-witted, he was obviously a talent who was good at defense. He could deal with sneak attacks and fire attacks in all aspects. Josiah's face turned pale, and he said in a panic, "What about Dunn?" The faster the fire was extinguished, the less time and opportunities left for Tang-un. Darren gritted his teeth. "Everyone get ready. We'll attack again, no." Borg hurriedly stopped him. "If we go out now, we'll be sending everyone to their deaths. Not only can we not attack, we have to retreat first. After the rain of arrows suppresses them, the enemy will definitely send infantry to push forward." "What?" Josiah's little face immediately turned red, and he said angrily, "Are you saying that you're giving up on Tang?" "I'm very sorry." Borg lowered his head and said in a sincere tone, "No one wants to give up on Brother Tang, but we have no other choice. We can't put everyone in danger because of one person. Josiah, this is war. Do we have to abandon our companions just because of war? In any case, I firmly disagree. Don't I want to save her? If you put it that way. All right." Darren waved his hand to stop their argument and said firmly, "The Gray Coat Army has never given up on their brothers. Let's attack again. Hopefully, we can cover Brother Tang's escape." Borg took a deep breath and exhaled. "I have my objections, but you're the captain, so I'll listen to your orders. I suggest that everyone retreat first and attack from the right. This way, we can reduce the casualties and create new points of fire." "Josiah, I'm sorry." "All right, let's do that," Darren said decisively. "Everyone listen up, get ready." "Huh?" Everyone was also stunned because the rain of arrows that kept attacking had suddenly become much less frequent. "Oh no, the enemy is going to attack." Borg's first reaction was to wave his sword and poke his head out. With this look, the long sword that he was waving paused in the air. Everyone poked their heads out. At this moment, the arrows were sparse and did not pose a threat at all. The fire in the camp in front had been completely extinguished, leaving only black smoke behind. However, behind it, a soaring fire snake was wantonly and enchanting, illuminating the camp. From the Gray Coat Army's point of view, it was as if they could feel the layers of heat waves hitting their faces. "That's the granary?" Borg finished his sentence and looked at this scene in a daze. He actually succeeded in such a short period of time. Huh. Burn his mother. This is so F***king satisfying. Everyone immediately jumped up and raised their weapons as they cheered. Everyone knew the Gray Coat Army's current situation. If they did not succeed this time, their future would be unimaginable. Now that they saw the provisions of their pursuers being burned to the ground, they were naturally ecstatic and satisfied. Darren tried his best to suppress the joy in his heart and roared, "Brothers, prepare to shoot. We want to bring our hero back." Roar, 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 everyone agreed crazily. With the continuous creaking sounds, the cork bows were pulled to the tightest. Then where was our hero Tang in now? Now, the camera was pulled to the side of the granary that was on fire and fixed on a soldier whose face was covered in black ash. At this moment, the soldier was holding a bucket of water in his left hand and a bag of sand in his right. All right, Tang in was putting out the fire. The fire in the granary was undoubtedly set by Tang in. He even went around the surroundings and lit more than 10 places on fire. When the fire first started, the soldiers were busy saving the front of the camp, so they did not notice. By the time the fire had spread, it was already too late to discover it. After Tang and admired his masterpiece for a while, he was ready to clap his hands and leave. Unexpectedly, a large group of soldiers rushed over in a panic. Then, he was captured and became a transport worker. He set the fire himself, and he still had to save in the end? Tang and was instantly annoyed. Originally, he wanted to use the time to sneak away quietly, but then he saw a middle-aged man in high-grade armor being surrounded by a crowd of people. After observing his words and actions, he realized that he was actually the commander of the enemy army. Could it be that the joke he made with Josiah earlier would come true? TSK, forget it. Since I've met him, I'll definitely give it a try. Tang and instantly made a decision. The middle-aged commander's expression was extremely gloomy as he paced around anxiously. Tang and was disguised as a soldier, so naturally he could not get close to the commander. He could only carry the things and walk slowly in the distance, hoping that this rabbit would bump into him. At this moment, a person who looked like a captain hurriedly walked toward the middle-aged man. After bowing, he pointed to the front and reported something. "What?" The middle-aged commander suddenly shouted. "Beggar, you're looking for death." There's a chance. Tangen's eyes flashed. He could not stay here for long. Since he could not wait, he could only take the initiative to attack. The middle-aged man's shout just now attracted the attention of the surrounding people. This was undoubtedly a good opportunity for Tang in to approach. Under the cover of the bucket, he took small steps. "Send out the infantry." After a pause, the middle-aged commander let out a long breath. "Forget it. Putting out the fire is more important. Deal with them later." "Yes. Wait. What are you doing here, you idiot? Send him over there to put out the fire." An officer reprimanded. Hearing the shout, everyone subconsciously looked over. Damn it. Tangen looked at the middle-aged commander who was about 70 to 80 feet away and gritted his teeth. Whoosh! The bucket and sand were thrown into the air. Suddenly, water splashed around the middle-aged commander and sand filled the air. "Small, be careful, there's poison." The officer who wanted to warn was frightened by the voice that came out of nowhere and subconsciously took a step back. At this moment, a figure swept over like a gust of wind and rushed into the sand. "Ding poo, ding ding, enemy attack." "How dare you? Officer, be careful." The soldiers who were standing at the side hesitated for a moment when they heard the word poison. Then, they could only watch as the assassin rushed into the sand. Then, the sound of weapons striking, threats, reminders. In a short moment, all kinds of sounds came from the gray sand. Poo bang. Green dough, cheese suddenly erupted from the sand. Then, two figures flew out at the same time. "Aha! Consider yourself lucky. Let's go, let's go." Extremely arrogant laughter came from one of the figures. Then, the figure flipped and flashed in the air. He stepped on the head of a soldier and floated into the distance. The soldier who was stepped on had half of his head sunk in and fell to the ground without a sound. "Kill him." The order was filled with anger and thunder. After a moment of chaos, groups of soldiers chased in the direction where the figure disappeared. When the dust settled, the middle-aged commander's face was ashen. Blood kept flowing out of his right shoulder. Under his feet, a figure wearing a chain armor was silent and motionless. A large pool of blood flowed out from the side. Everyone was shocked and opened their mouths. This armor, wasn't it the captain of the guards? Naturally, there were guards around the commander to protect him. When Tang In rushed into the sand to assassinate, the captain's reaction was a beat slower. Because it was unexpected, Tang In instantly gained the upper hand against the middle-aged commander and left a wound on his shoulder. However, when Tang In was about to kill, the captain arrived and blocked the fatal blow. Then, his Do Chi burst out and shook both of them away. The middle-aged commander stared at the captain, then raised his head and waved his hand. A few soldiers came over and carried the corpse away. After a while, a small team leader came over. "Sir, the assassin ran away." "Ran away?" The middle-aged commander's eyes twitched. He asked calmly, "What was my order?" Kill him, but there was the Gray Coat army outside. We were worried that there would be an ambush, so we didn't chase. There was support. The middle-aged commander looked at the fire that had not been extinguished. A yellow light suddenly bloomed on his heavy sword. He turned around. Bang! The captain's body flew out like a broken cloth bag. Blood splattered everywhere. His chest was shriveled. It was obvious that he was not going to live. "Didn't you hear me tell you to kill him? All of you are a bunch of trash, good-for-nothings. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation." Chapter 134. When I opened the door, whoa, guess what I saw? There were too many things. There was fresh venison, fresh vegetables, honeyed fruits. Big bags filled the entire warehouse. Hey, David, you're not bad. Look at you, you're drooling. Haha. On the winding mountain road, a large group of people surrounded Tang In as they walked forward. Laughter could be heard everywhere. "What are you laughing at? What a pity." The young man named David couldn't help but smack his lips with a yearning look. David and Tang In were quite familiar with each other. It was him and Tang In who formed the deceiving team during the previous battle in the valley. Pity? There are even more pitiful things to come. Tang In grinned with a look of regret. "There's more." David was shocked. "Is there something more delicious?" Tang In rolled his eyes speechlessly. "Foodie, it's a person this time." "What a person?" David instantly took a step back and stuttered. "Big brother Tang In, you even ate a person." Tang In stumbled, tears streaming down his face. "F***. I said I ate a person." Pooey, I said I met a person." "Oh, then you told me everything. You scared me." David looked innocent. "Did I King tell you everything?" Tang In turned his head away, determined to ignore him. "I met the enemy's commander." Borg and Darren opened their mouths in shock. "Commander, Brother Tang, don't tell me you." "Yes, I made a move." Tang In shook his head and sighed. "It's a pity that someone interfered and I couldn't kill him." Sigh. Everyone couldn't help but clap their hands. After feeling sorry for him, Darren stroked his beard and said, "It's okay that you couldn't kill him. Well, I'm afraid you won't be able to see him again, huh?" Borg nodded in agreement. The army's rations were burned, so the commander naturally had to retreat with the pursuing troops. Yes, the enemy is about to retreat. Everyone will work harder in the next few days and go out to look for food. As long as we survive this period of time, we will definitely celebrate when we reach this second hiding spot. Darren took advantage of the high morale to say some words of encouragement. "Haha, Captain, don't worry. We were all born poor, so this little bit of hardship is nothing. Besides, there are so many wild animals and vegetables in the mountains. It's so delicious." David was the first to stand up and respond. That's right. Compared to difficulties, people were more afraid of not having any hope. It had to be said that this victory had solved many problems. Although the rations had not been settled yet, everyone was not worried at all. After all, as long as he was alive and there was still hope, he would be able to persevere. In contrast to the optimistic Gray Coat army, the soldiers' camp was gloomy. Scattered wooden planks, scattered arrows, burnt tents. The ground was a mess, and black smoke billowed. The tired soldiers came and went to clean up. They did not dare to make too much noise because everyone knew that the commander was in a bad mood. No one wanted to be unlucky at this time. In the middle of the camp, an officer stepped into the main tent. The middle-aged commander was sitting in front of a wooden table with a huge map in front of him. However, from his slightly dull eyes, one could tell that his mind was not on the map at the moment. "Sir, the situation has been calculated." The officer bowed and said, "Speak." "Attack tonight. 15 soldiers died, and more than 20 were injured. Most of the injured were burned. We lost a little military equipment, but we lost rations. We lost rations." At this point, the officer was very hesitant. The middle-aged commander raised his head and said with a gloomy expression, "Just say how many days of rations are left." There are 3 days left." Crack! He clenched his fists tightly, and a crisp sound came from his knuckles. The middle-aged commander's body swayed, and his expression became even darker. He had seen the fire in the granary just now and knew that the losses would not be small. However, after hearing the exact number, he still felt like his vision darkened. Half a month's worth of rations, and now there were only 2 days left. No one will be able to bear this difference. The tent fell into silence, and the atmosphere was heavy. The officer looked at the middle-aged commander who was in a daze, gritted his teeth, and bowed. "Sir, we can only retreat now." "Retreat?" The middle-aged commander smiled bitterly and shook his head. "Do you know whose idea it was to eliminate the Gray Coat Army? Wasn't it an order from the military department?" "It was the military department, but the Zechen Legion also intervened. Zechen's combat department also gave battle suggestions, and even the hiding place of the Gray Coat Army was circled by Marshal Z. Do you think we can still retreat now?" Zechen Legion, Marshal Z." The officer was completely confused. How did this small Gray Coat Army have anything to do with the strongest legion in the Brand Kingdom? After digesting this news, the officer finally understood the middle-aged commander's difficulties. It was important to know that their 2,000-man army was under the command of the military department. Now, no matter what the Zechen Legion's motive was, they were very concerned about this matter. If they came to the military department to inquire after this matter and found out that they had failed and did not take down this small Gray Coat Army, then they would lose a lot of face. The officer did not need to think to know how the military department would treat them. They would probably be sent to the military court. "Sir, then we should continue chasing." The middle-aged commander's eyes flashed fiercely. Since they have staked everything on the sneak attack, it means that they have run out of rations. I don't believe that they can run for long on an empty stomach. From now on, the rations of the entire army will be halved. I want to eliminate them in 3 days. "Yes, sir." It had to be said that this was a ridiculous misunderstanding. Z circled the hiding place of the Gray Coat Army to teach the 2 students a lesson. As for the battle suggestion from the tactical department, it was written by one of the officers who had nothing better to do. It was believed that neither Z nor the officer would have thought of this incident. However, due to a strange combination of factors, the middle-aged commander had no choice but to give chase because of this huge pressure. Of course, the unluckiest ones were the Gray Coat Army that Tang En was in. It was not easy for them to escape from the pursuit, but unexpectedly, a bigger test had just begun. Tang En did not know that there was so much inside information, and he did not have the time to think about it. This was because the system notification that had not appeared for a long time sounded as soon as he stepped into the dimension. Ding! Assassin Tang En has joined the profit-oriented organization Gray Coat Army. Ding! System mission released. Mission content: establish an assassination department in the organization. The mission is to train assassins. Completion time: 7 days. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 135. Tang En stood in the space in a daze as he listened to the emotionless, synthesized voice of the system. He was a little confused. Assassination department? Training assassins? What's going on? Look for the old butler if you have any questions. Tang En looked over in confusion. The old butler said calmly, some missions in the assassin system are passive. They will be triggered by some of the host's actions. Once you join the Gray Coat Army, it will ask you to set up an assassination department in the organization. If you continue to work alone, this mission will be triggered forever. Understood. Tang nodded. That means I've stepped on a landmine. Then this assassination department is for killing people? What else? Tang understood. Assassin system. What else could it be for other than this? Forget it. I'll just kill people. After understanding the meaning of this assassination department, Tang started his basic training as usual. The current Tang was no longer the naive young man from Little Rock Village. Killing people was a common thing for him. The system's blood energy value of close to 10,000 was proof. Moreover, people were bound to die, weren't they? The next morning, the team was ready to set off. Although they thought they had shaken off their pursuers, the Gray Coat Army still had to get closer to the second hiding spot as soon as possible. Tang found Darren washing up by the stream. How many people do you want to borrow? Darren asked in surprise after understanding Tang's intentions. Tang nodded and said, since I've joined the Gray Coat Army, I think I have to do something. So I want to borrow a few people to set up a small team. Well, the purpose of this team is to scout ahead and secretly gather information. And kill people along the way. Scouts? It's a little different. You can say that. That's great. Darren clapped his hands and said happily, I've been worried that this team doesn't have any scouts. Every time we set up camp, we'll try our luck. It's great that Brother Tang is willing to accept this. This Gray Coat Army originally had scouts, but they were all killed by the pursuers before they were surrounded in the valley. That's great. But I don't know much about choosing a place to set up camp. Don't worry, it's very simple. Brother Tang, you're so smart. You'll learn it quickly. Darren waved his hand nonchalantly before asking, how many people do you need? I'm not sure. There shouldn't be too many. I'll choose for myself. Not long after, the team was assembled. DeLuan said loudly, Brothers, Brother Tang wants to form a scout team. He's short of people now. Who's willing to join? I'm willing. As soon as the voice fell, a hand was raised. It was the young man named David. Me too. Let me try. In a moment, dozens of people stood out. Everyone knew about Tang's ability, and they had also seen what he had done recently. Now that they heard that he wanted to form a small team, many people immediately responded. Tang took a step forward and bowed. Thank you for your support. Well, my team's requirements are a bit special, so those who want to join will have to go through 2 tests. Test. No problem. Big Brother Tang tell us, what's the test? David said casually. The first test is very simple. Tang pointed to the forest to the side and said, everyone, go and chop down a tree trunk. When the team sets off, you have to carry it on your shoulders and move with us. That's it. No problem. I'll go now. David was very enthusiastic as he strode towards the forest. Then, the dozens of people also took out their weapons and went to chop down the trees. Thus, when the Gray Coat Army set off, a group of people carrying tree trunks walked in front of the team. Northerners were mostly strong, and the average weight of these tree trunks of different sizes was about 75 kilograms. These people carried the trunks on their shoulders without any pressure. Under the strange gazes of the people behind them, they walked valiantly. Tang didn't seem to care about these people's actions. At this moment, he was communicating with Darren about scouting and choosing a campsite. As the saying goes, stones from other mountains can be used to polish jade. Although Tang didn't really understand this, he knew which roads were suitable for sneak attacks and which places were easy to infiltrate. Thus, by inferring other things from one example, he improved very quickly. After the team traveled for an hour, the dozens of people carrying the tree trunks slowly saw the difference. The stronger ones walked in front, the slower ones lagged behind, and the weaker ones were at the back. The people at the side saw something new and naturally pointed at those who lagged behind. Those who couldn't take it immediately tried to force their way forward. They didn't expect to be at the front, but at least they couldn't be at the back. Of course, there were also some who went crazy, such as David. He had the strongest physique, so he walked in front of the team proudly. However, the good times didn't last long. As the winter sun gradually rose, these dozens of people slowly fell behind the team. At this moment, most of these people's expressions were ferocious. White steam was coming out of their bodies, and sweat kept dripping down their heads. However, even if it passed through their eyes, they didn't dare to wipe it away. This was because they didn't know when, but the tree trunks that were originally on their shoulders started to feel a little uncontrollable. One moment, they were sliding down, the next moment, they were leaning forward, and the next moment, they were falling backward. The tree trunks can't fall on the ground more than 3 times, and each fall can't exceed 3 seconds. Those who violate this rule will fail. Tang En, who was chatting happily with Darren and the others, said without turning his head. The dozens of people became even more careful when they heard this. However, this wasn't a problem that could be avoided just by being careful. After traveling for about 2 hours, the first tree trunk fell on the ground with a bang. Although he was immediately lifted up again, this sound seemed to have triggered something. In the next few minutes, bang, 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 the sound of tree trunks falling on the ground kept ringing. Tang En tilted his head slightly, took a look, and continued chatting. The Gray Coat Army was slowing down now, and no one was in the mood to mock them because everyone could tell that this wasn't a simple matter. Ugh! Angry roars sounded one after another, as if they were cheering for themselves, but also as if they were the angry roars of wild wolves before they died. At this moment, these dozens of people were lifting the tree trunks in all sorts of strange ways. Some were hanging them on their shoulders, some were holding them in their arms, some were squatting down to hold them on their thighs, and some were moving forward step by step. The only person who could still carry the tree trunks was David, but looking at his trembling legs, he looked like he was having a hard time. Tang, and turned his head in confusion. When he saw Josiah's pained expression, he nodded in realization. He turned around and said, "Cough, cough. Those who can't hold on can choose to give up. Failure is actually nothing." What's that saying again? Oh, failure is the mother of success. If you fail a few more times, you might be able to find your mother. You'll succeed. Josiah was speechless. After the Gray Coat Army had traveled for 3 hours, Darren announced that they were taking a break. After all, lunch hadn't been settled yet. They needed to spend time looking for it. At this moment, there were only 6 people left who had successfully lifted the tree trunks. When Tang En announced the end, David fell to the ground with the tree. He was panting heavily like a dead dog. Tang En looked at these people with a smile. Then he walked to the group of people who had failed and stopped in front of a skinny young man. That person raised his head weakly. His handsome and somewhat feminine face was pale. "You passed too." The young man was stunned. Then, his face flushed red and he looked happy. "Brother Tang, this?" Darren asked in confusion. He failed because he reached his limit. Darren was still confused. Tang En smiled and walked away, but he didn't explain. However, the other people who had failed seemed to understand something. They all lowered their heads. Were the people who had passed stronger than him? That didn't seem to be the case. Did he use all his strength just now? He didn't. He was too tired. There was a voice in his heart telling him that it was impossible to succeed and that he should give up. In the end, he gave up when a young man walked over. Tang En said to the remaining 7 people, "Haha, congratulations on passing the first round. But the next round is the main point. Let's begin." After saying that, Tang En walked to a burly man. His smile didn't fade, but his eyes gradually turned cold. He took a step forward and raised his head. Boom! That person looked as if he was struck by lightning. He took 3 steps back. His tired legs tilted, and he was about to fall to the ground. Tang En reached out to support him and shook his head. Then he spread his hands apologetically. That person retreated to the side silently. He still looked as if he had seen a ghost. Then, the second person. After seeing the situation just now, this person was a little confused. Then, when he met Tang En's gaze, he also took a few steps back and was about to fall to the ground. Tang En supported him and shook his head regretfully. The onlookers looked at each other. They couldn't help but feel a chill run down their spines. "What's going on?" Darren, on the other hand, saw something. Before Thor's hammer, he had been tested by Tang In like this. After thinking about it, he realized that this was probably killing intent. Then it was David. When he saw the reaction of the two people in front, he felt a little scared. When he saw Tang In looking over with a smile, he immediately became serious. He took a firm stance and stared at him with his eyes wide open. 3 seconds, 5 seconds, big brother Tang In, why are you looking at me like that? David touched his head and said in surprise, Tang In frowned. His eyes were like a deep pool of water, swallowing everything. David couldn't help but hug his arms. Why do I suddenly feel a little cold? Tang In couldn't help but laugh. His killing intent dissipated. He couldn't tell whether this guy didn't have any reaction or was too careless. You pass. In the end, Tang In decided to let him pass. I passed just like that? David was pleasantly surprised. Then, he seemed to have thought of something and grabbed Tang In's hand. Boss Tang In. Boss, thank you so much. I'll follow you from now on. Finally, he winked as if he knew what was going on. This guy can't be thinking that I went easy on him, right? Tang In didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Then, Tang In tested 3 more people. All of them couldn't resist his killing intent. He couldn't help but feel a little disappointed. Finally, it was the young man who had failed earlier. Tang In released his killing intent. That young man instantly took a step back and lowered his head. Sigh. Tang In sighed softly in his heart. Could it be that the first organization he established only had 1 member in the end? This wasn't much better than being a general without an army. Suddenly, a roar sounded. Roar! An unpleasant roar was heard. That young man looked up. His eyes were slightly red, and his feminine face was terrifying. He took a step forward and threw a punch at Tang In. Tang In wasn't shocked. Instead, he was happy. He chuckled and dodged the punch. Then, he used his palm as a knife and hit the back of the young man's neck. Bang! Tang In hugged the unconscious man and smiled at Darren. I'll take these too. If you like this work, you're welcome to come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 136. Just 2 people? Darren asked in surprise. Yes, just these 2 for now. Tang In handed the young man to David. Find a place for him to lie down and rest. Yes, boss. Is there any other way to address them? Why does it sound like a mafia? Other ways to address them? Yes, big leader. David gave an answer after thinking about it for a while. Damn it, I've become a bandit again. Tang In touched his forehead. Forget it, I'll just call you boss. Yes, big leader. Finally, Tang In managed to get rid of David, who was a little out of his mind. Tang In turned and asked, Uncle Darren, do you know anything about that young man just now? Darren stroked his beard and said, His name is Michaud. I think he's from a business family. His caravan was robbed by a bandit group. Our gray coat army happened to pass by and saved him, but his family didn't survive. I see. Tang In nodded thoughtfully. His killing intent might have caused Michaud to have some illusions. He probably saw his family being killed by the bandits again, so he instantly exploded. Why? Is there a problem with him? No. Why? Why do you ask? Tang In sensed that Darren seemed to be implying something. This Michaud is a bit of a loner, and he's not very popular. Someone told me a few times that he seems to be a bit afraid of death, and he's a bit timid on the battlefield. Of course, I only heard about it. You can see for yourself. Okay, I know. Probably because he has too much hatred in his heart. A person with a blood feud would naturally cherish his life before he took his revenge. Tang In didn't care about this. Sometimes, hatred could be a powerful driving force. Okay, I'll bring some people to hunt some game first. Darren waved his hand and bid farewell to Tang In. The Gray Coat Army's rations had run out last night, and their breakfast this morning was only leftover rice soup. Now that they had traveled for 3 hours, they were naturally hungry. After they set up camp, Mrs. Megan led a group of women, children, and old people to look for wild vegetables in the vicinity. As long as they weren't injured, they had to form teams to hunt. It was winter in the wilderness, so it was difficult to find wild animals. Therefore, most of them walked towards the forest in the distance. That way, even if they couldn't find any wild animals, they could still find some mushrooms and fungi. If one was lucky enough to encounter a rare tree that bore fruit in winter, it would be considered a great harvest. "Hey, there are mushrooms here," a surprised voice sounded. Then a white figure stopped beside the dead tree. On top of the rotten wood, there was a row of colorful mushrooms that looked very beautiful. "Josiah, don't touch it." Ugh. Her jade-like hand froze in the air. Tang and walked out from the side with the vines and cork. "This thing is called a flower umbrella. It's poisonous." "Haha, Brother Tang, you're so knowledgeable." Borg walked over from the other side with a smile, and the last one was the stocky David. "I've only seen it before. I also know that this thing and the star tear vine can be ground together to make a strong laxative." After settling down Michaud, Tang and wanted to take David out to hunt wild animals. But he didn't expect to meet Josiah and Borg. Originally, the woman only needed to pick up some wild vegetables, but Josiah was a magician after all, so he chose to hunt wild animals. Since they met, the four of them immediately went into the forest in the north of the mountain. Flower umbrella? Josiah looked left and right, then looked at the delightful mushroom, and finally sighed. "The name is quite nice, but it's not edible. Boss, there doesn't seem to be any wild animals here." After all, he was a commoner, so he had some experience in hunting. David looked around and made his decision. After tying the vines to the cork, Tang nodded and said, "This place is not far from the roadside, so of course there isn't any. Well, let's go inside and have a look." "Brother Tang, you've been busy. What are you doing?" Borg looked at the thing in his hand and asked. "It's just a simple crossbow." Twain smiled. A cold light flashed in his hand, and a groove was opened in the middle of the cork. As they went deeper and deeper, Josiah finally found some oyster mushrooms, but there was still no trace of wild animals. Finally, in front of a bush, Tang's eyes lit up and he bent down. "Tang, did you find anything?" "Well, I finally caught one." Tang and gently parted some bushes and stared for a while. "It should be a pistio." Josiah and Borg came over, but no matter how they looked, they didn't find anything strange. "Pistio?" David was excited. "Where is it?" "I've eaten roe deer meat when I was young. It's tender and delicious." "This foodie," Tang rolled his eyes and said, "David, do you know how to use a crossbow?" "Yes, it's easy." "All right, you can use this later." Tang handed the crossbow loaded with bolts to David. After that, Tang silently took 10 steps forward and looked around. A blood-red light flashed, and he suddenly stomped his foot. Bang! A loud sound came from where he landed. Before the sound stopped, about 3 meters behind Tang, a black shadow rushed out like lightning. It had velvety ears and short horns. It was a pistio. Whoosh, whoosh. 2 white ice arrows instantly passed by Tang and hit the pistio. Needless to say, it was Josiah. However, although she reacted quickly, the roe deer was faster. As a result, the 2 ice arrows fell in the empty space behind it. Puff! Then the bowstring vibrated, and an arrow was shot out quickly. But the direction was a bit off, damn it. Tang only saw darkness in the corner of his eyes. His figure flashed, and the arrow was shot by his side. Whoosh! Then a black light was thrown out, nailing the rogue man who was about to jump through the bushes. Woo, there was a whine. "Be careful." At this time, a belated warning was heard. Tang walked over with a dark face, pulled out the black dagger, and came back with a fat pistio. "Didn't you say you knew how to use a crossbow?" David lowered his head and muttered, "I know how to use it." Tang glared and was angry. "You call this knowing how to use it? Damn, you can shoot me from a few meters away. I just pulled it. I've seen others use it before. It's just that I'm not familiar with it." David had an innocent expression. Tang opened his mouth, but he was speechless. When this guy said he knew how to use it, he really only knew how to use it. Damn it, he only knew how to pull the trigger. Phew, forget it, give me the crossbow. Tang let out a long breath and took back the crossbow. It seemed like this guy was not cut out for crossbows. Of course, Tang brought David out not just for hunting, but mainly to see what he was good at and to think about which direction to train him. Now, it seemed that other than being a little crazy, there was nothing special about him. This thing is a Pichio? It's so fat. Josiah squatted on the ground and looked at it curiously. It was no wonder that Josiah was surprised. This wild Pichio's body was indeed fat, and it looked like a calf from afar. With his first catch, their confidence was boosted. They went deeper, but they were not so lucky. In the end, they found some fungus and returned to the camp. At this time, most of the team had returned. Seeing the Pichio on David's shoulder, Darren's eyes lit up, and he welcomed them with joy. Haha, this is a Pichio, right? We're in luck today. There were a few hundred people. Even if they were lucky, they would only get a mouthful of soup and a few pieces of meat at most. They did not get many wild animals. There were only a few pheasants scattered around. After handing the meat to the women, a delicious smell wafted out. In the end, everyone got a bowl of soup with wild vegetables, mushrooms, bones, and 2 pieces of meat. The conditions were tough, but everyone was in good spirits. They happily sipped the soup. At this time, a burly man suddenly rushed over from the hill with a panicked expression. Haha, it's useless no matter how fast you run. Who told you to come back so late? Someone teased. Oh no, the soldiers are catching up. What? If you like this work, you're welcome to come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 137. They climbed the mountain and looked into the distance. There were 2 knights galloping on the winding mountain road. When they passed through some dangerous terrain, the knights would always pull on the reins and carefully observe the surroundings. Sometimes, one of them would even get off the horse and bend down to reach the top of the mountain. After ensuring that there was no danger, the 2 of them continued to move forward. Those who were familiar with battle formations could tell that these 2 knights were scouts. This meant that there would be a large group of people passing through here later. Now that the Gray Coat army was in front, it was obvious who the people behind them were. How is this possible? Borg muttered to himself as he stood at the top of the mountain. This was also the same question that everyone in the Gray Coat army had. Although they saw the scouts with their own eyes, they still couldn't believe that the pursuers were following them again. And they didn't seem to be far away. Could it be that their rations weren't burned? Impossible. Tang Yin frowned and said firmly, no matter how they tried to save them, they could only save 10% at most. Brother Tang set the fire himself. This can't be wrong, Darren said as he glanced at Borg. Borg nodded inside. That means that this commander is going to stake everything and risk his life to keep us here. But why? I can't figure it out. Darren stroked his beard and looked into the distance. There's no point in thinking about this now. Let's gather the troops and leave. With that, Darren walked down the mountain first and began to shout for everyone to pack up and set off quickly. The delicious soup was still lingering in their mouths when the Gray Coat army began their escape again. This escape lasted until nighttime. However, this time, the pursuers seemed to have been given a death order and refused to let go. No matter when, as long as they climbed to the top of the mountain, they would see the 2 scouts behind them. At this moment, the Gray Coat army was tired and hungry. They had already digested their lunch. However, they couldn't find the time to look for food now, so they could only endure it. 10 li behind the Gray Coat army, the 2 scouts patted their horses and continued to approach. When they were about to reach a turning point, the 2 of them pulled on the reins at the same time. They looked at each other and dismounted from their horses, as if they were about to come up to check. Suddenly, the 2 of them pulled the horse's head and agilely flipped onto the horse's back. Crack, crack! 2 whipping sounds were heard. The horses felt the pain and rushed back to where they came from. With their tacit understanding and agile movements, the 2 of them did not waste a single second. Stop right there! A loud shout rang out. 2 figures rushed out from the bushes beside the turn, but it was already too late. It was impossible for an ordinary 2-legged person to catch up to a 4-legged person. Stop your head. You still have a nerve to shout. I already told you to hide well. He teased casually with a hint of disappointment. The 2 scouts were shocked. They looked up and saw a black figure standing quietly in the middle of the road ahead. Go back. The figure that was more than 10 meters away appeared between the two horses as if it had teleported. Then, the bloody palm imprinted on both sides of the horse's abdomen. Bang! The war horse neighed. The two horses were sent flying, but the two scouts reacted quickly. They immediately kicked off their saddles and jumped up. Huh! With a long laugh, the figure also leaped up. Whoosh! Whoosh! The scouts all had small hidden weapons on them, and these two were no exception. He pressed the back of his left hand, and two arrows were instantly shot out. Interesting. Huh? The two scouts looked up and saw the black figure in front of them. The figure that was shot by the arrows gradually disappeared. Then, the bloody light bloomed. Puff! Puff! Before the two scouts could react, their left shoulder was stabbed, and their bodies were kicked backward. The two scouts were desperate. The man in black was too strong. Bang! Bang! They fell heavily to the ground. One each. Kill them. Yes, boss. A burly man rushed over and raised his heavy sword to smash one of the scouts. Another thin young man followed behind silently. He raised his machete and chopped off the head of the other scout. These three people were, of course, Tang In and his two subordinates, David and Michaud. In fact, Tang In had wanted to kill the scouts behind him for a long time, but Michaud had not woken up at that time. When Michaud finally woke up at night, Tang In took the two men to find scouts. He wanted to see their performance in actual combat. At this time, the two scouts did not care about the pain in their bodies. They quickly rolled a few times to avoid the attack and stood up. "Oh, you rolled quite fast," David said in surprise, and his heavy sword swept horizontally. The scout looked at Tang In, who was standing leisurely at the side. He gritted his teeth, pulled out his sword, and started fighting with David. At this time, Michaud was also fighting with the other scout. As the eyes of the team, the scouts were naturally not weak. Otherwise, Tang In would not have cut off one of their hands first, and then let David and Michaud fight. David's fighting style was very bold and unrestrained. He just kept smashing with his heavy sword. This was the kind of person who could defeat Tang with brute force. This was not the first time Tang In had seen this style of attack. The Flower of Knights, Sylvia, also used this style of attack. However, there was a huge gap between their realms. Xiao Weian's sword was a heavy sword without a sharp edge. David only knew this kind of simple attack, and he did not know how to use complex attacks. Now that the scout had injured one of his shoulders, he could not use many skills. In terms of pure strength, he was not David's opponent, so he was very embarrassed and had been at a disadvantage. Looking at Michaud again, Tang In could not help but frown. At this time, he was being suppressed by the scout. It was not that the scout was very powerful, but that every time Michaud attacked, he was a little slow. It was obvious that he was holding back his strength, and he seemed to be worried. Tang In said, "I know you want to avenge your parents. I can also tell you that revenge is not a problem for you. But based on your current performance, I don't think you are qualified to join me." Michaud's body suddenly trembled, and then he suddenly slashed forward with his long sword. Then, step by step, his sword became faster and faster, and the attacker and the defender exchanged positions in an instant. At this time, David's side was about to win. The scout felt aggrieved. He roared angrily, and a ball of blue light enveloped his saber. "Hey, you have this too?" David shook his heavy sword, and a thin layer of yellow light appeared, barely covering the blade. Then, David continued to smash the scout with his heavy sword. The scout had good skills, and his fighting energy was stronger than David's, but he was still suppressed. Finally, the scout was defeated. The scout's sword was abruptly smashed away by David, and then his head was hit by the sword. Immediately, half of the scout's body collapsed. "Huh?" David looked up to the sky and laughed, and then took a step forward to help Michaud. "David, don't move," Tang In shouted. At this time, although Michaud suddenly burst out, it was not difficult for the scout to deal with. After all, Michaud didn't have such abnormal strength, and he didn't have any fighting energy. When the scout saw that his companion was killed, his eyes flashed fiercely, and after a few exchanges with Michaud, suddenly, a red light flashed in his eyes. The red light on his sword burst out, and it hit Michaud's head head-on. Bang! The long sword was sent flying. Die with me." The scout's face was ferocious, and he slashed his sword at Michaud's throat. He knew that he was going to die. Not to mention the unfathomable black-clothed man next to him. He couldn't even resist the seemingly reckless man next to him. "Be careful." David was shocked, and he swung his heavy sword at the scout's back, intending to make him hesitate. Bang! Tang, and narrowed his eyes, and a glimmer of light flashed in his eyes. Then, the scout's body was sent flying, but the fatal injury was not from David's attack, but a small sword that was inserted in the left side of his heart. It turned out that in that split second, Michaud had actually slid out a short sword and stabbed it into his opponent's heart. The speed of his hand was really amazing. "Haha, good job, Michaud," David praised. Tang and also nodded his head. Of these two subordinates, one was strong, and the other had fast hands. They could be trained. "Okay, let's clean up and catch up with the team." "Yes, boss." David began to pick up the things on the two scouts. Tangan was speechless, and he said weakly, "Who told you to clean up?" What do you want to clean up?" "Of course it's the horses. Otherwise, why would I come here for these two scouts?" "Oh yes, you can eat horse meat." "Boss, you are really wise." "Don't talk nonsense, hurry up." To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 138. The dawn was slightly bright. A large group of people walked silently on the mountain path. Their eyes were bloodshot, and frost could be seen on their hair. Their movements were more like machines. This was the gray coat army that had been running for the entire night. In fact, not only were they tired, but their empty stomachs would also growl from time to time. They had only eaten 2 meals for the entire day and night. Of the 2 horses that Tangan brought back last night, one was slaughtered immediately. However, after dividing it among a few hundred people, each person received very little. In addition to this continuous journey, it was quickly consumed. At this moment, a figure floated down from the hill behind the group. After a few leaps, he rushed to the front. "How is it?" Darren hurriedly asked when he saw the person. Tang and shook his head. "They're still chasing." "Damn it." Darren's eyes were like copper bells as he cursed. Then, he said angrily, "Are they trying to drag it out with us? All right, let's see who can last until the end." "We can't drag it out." Borg narrowed his eyes and said helplessly, "They only need to chase like this for another day. Then, they'll split the 2,000 people into 2 groups and take turns to chase. If any group catches up, we'll definitely die." This was the truth. By then, they would already be exhausted. Not to mention 1,000 people. Even if they had the same number of people, they wouldn't have any chance of winning. Darren sighed secretly. Then, he looked at the people behind him who had lost their energy from running for a long time. If this continued, they wouldn't be able to hold on for long. After pondering for a moment, Darren said decisively, "Then, we won't give them a chance to split up. After resting, we'll enter the southwest jungle." Although the mountain path was full of twists and turns, there was always a path to find. As long as the scouts set the direction and the pursuers took turns to rest, they would be able to catch up again. However, once they entered the jungle, it would be impossible to do so without knowing the direction because it would be very easy to lose the target. Southwest. Borg's expression changed. "You mean to enter the 100,000 mountains and meet up with the main force?" When the Gray Coat Army was split up, other than coming up with a second hiding place, they also anticipated the worst-case scenario. If a team couldn't hold on, they could go to the 100,000 mountains to meet up with the main force and ask for help. "That's right. Other than that, we have no other choice," Darren said in a low voice. Borg opened his mouth, but hesitated. In the end, he sighed and didn't say anything. Tangan knew what Borg was worried about. Although entering the forest could temporarily reduce the advantage of the pursuers, it was still very dangerous. But how could the jungle be easy to walk through? It was completely dark inside, and it was impossible to distinguish between east and west. It was possible to get lost and stay there forever, or run into pursuers after walking around in a circle. Moreover, there were many magical beasts and many natural traps. It was a very dangerous path. However, what Darren said was indeed the truth. They had no other way out other than this. Darren casually found a leeward hill and waved his hand, indicating for everyone to rest. Soon after, he instructed Mrs. Megan to kill the other horse and share it with everyone. Then, Darren announced the next route. No one said anything and just nodded in tacit agreement. At this point, all he could do was to keep moving forward. The horse meat was quickly cut up, and after roasting, each person was given about 1 kilogram. At around 8 in the morning, the Gray Coat Army entered the forest. The environment of the forest was unique, and it had its own set of laws. As they walked a little deeper, the cold wind from the north was almost undetectable. It was as if even the cold wind couldn't blow into this primitive landscape. The temperature rose a little, and this made everyone a little more spirited. However, it was soon followed by a damp and gloomy feeling, which made them feel depressed. As they continued to go deeper, the trees that covered the sky blocked the winter light, and the environment became dark. There were some withered branches and rotten leaves under their feet. When they stepped on them, they sank slightly and made rustling sounds. After walking for a short distance, a pungent smell wafted over, making them feel uncomfortable. Darren was elated. He looked around and found a few white, crooked tree trunks. As they walked closer, the pungent smell became even stronger. Darren didn't care. He waved his heavy sword and gently drew it on the tree trunk. Instantly, a white liquid flowed out. Darren took some of the liquid and smeared it on his armor. He then turned around and said, "Everyone, get some and smear it on your body. This can prevent ants from biting you." They were all people who had been running around in the north for a long time, so they naturally knew how powerful the ants in the forest were. If they were bitten, they would be swollen at best, and their wounds would fester at worst. Even death was common. After a moment, both men and women smeared the liquid on their bodies. Josiah hesitated for a moment before bravely going forward to smear the liquid on his robe. Tangan didn't smear it. Of course, it wasn't because he was afraid of the smell. An assassin's 5 senses were very sensitive. He couldn't let the smell cover his sense of smell. Besides, his killing intent had already been formed. Ordinary ants really didn't dare to approach him. Under his signal, David and Michaud didn't smear it either. After doing all this, the team continued on their way. At this moment, Tang led David and Michaud in front. After all, when he promised Aaron, he had taken the job of a scout. Besides, was there a more suitable training ground than the forest? Pay attention to your feet. Walk in the direction of the leaves. Don't step on withered branches and the like, because that will expose your whereabouts. Before he finished speaking, David scratched his head in embarrassment. He raised his foot and stepped on a withered branch hidden under the leaves. Tang was expressionless. Go to the front and open up a path. Slash your sword 1,000 times. Yes, boss. David didn't have the slightest awareness of being punished. He walked in front happily and kept slashing with his sword. It was still better to brandish his sword without any scruples. Walking lightly was too torturous. Shaking his head weakly, Tang retracted his gaze. Everyone's talent was different. David's characteristics destined him not to be a killer who ambushed in the dark. However, there couldn't be only one type of person in an organization, so Tang wanted to guide David into a strong blocking warrior. He was very confident in this because he had Bess's research results. However, this thing was of great importance, so he naturally couldn't give it away easily. He needed to observe it carefully. Compared to David, Michaud really made Tang happy. He was born to be a killer. He was calm, patient, and talented in hand speed. It can be said that if it weren't for Tang's killer system, Tang wouldn't be able to compare with Michaud. Now, Tang has asked Michaud to abandon the sword and focus on practicing the short sword. It's a pity that Michaud can't generate battle energy yet. Battle energy is unique to the system, and Tang can't teach it even if he wanted to. Tang didn't understand battle energy, although he had Bess's route, but that was built on the foundation of fighting spirit. Tang also asked David how his battle energy was generated. However, David's answer was as unreliable as ever. According to him, he didn't know how it was generated. David was strong since he was a child. He used to carry goods for merchants in a town. When he was carrying things, he found that when he used his full strength, some yellow light would be produced. This was what people meant when they compared themselves to others. Talent was really something that could not be envied. Looking at Michaud, who was practicing his footwork, Tang In smacked his lips. It seems that he needs to get a battle energy cultivation method as soon as possible. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 139. However, just after dusk, the forest was shrouded in darkness. Some mosquitoes were singing softly, and some unknown giant beasts were growling in the distance. Everything seemed distant and deep. Such an environment was a forbidden zone for ordinary people, and it was also the world of night walkers. At this moment, there was a night walker squatting in the bushes that reached his waist. The standard light armor and pitch-black short sword were the standard equipment of the Brand Scouts. No one was willing to hide in the bushes for no reason. One had to know that it was the favorite area of activity of ants. They did not mind taking a bite out of the unknown creatures that invaded their territory. At this moment, rustle, rustle. The sound of feet stepping on rotten leaves was heard. The scout adjusted his body slightly and placed the short sword in front of him. Without a doubt, this should be the reason why he was willing to bend over here. Soon, a tall figure appeared not far away. Although the environment was dark, after the eyes adapted, they could still see some things. This figure held a heavy sword and gently lowered his feet. His head turned around from time to time, and he looked very cautious. The scout in the bushes seemed very patient and did not attack immediately. Instead, he held his breath slightly and leaned forward as if he was frozen. The black figure took a few more steps forward. After turning his head and looking around, he began to move to the right. The scout couldn't help but frown, because this was the opposite direction of where he was hiding. After thinking for a while, the scout bent over and moved slowly in the bushes, as if he wanted to go around to the side of the black figure. The bushes moved slightly. The scout's eyes stared at the black figure through the gaps. He was confident that his movement was absolutely silent. He was getting closer and closer. At this moment, the black figure looked a little hesitant and stopped. Ha! The scout grinned and laughed silently. The heavens are helping me. In an instant, he moved to the back of the black figure. The two of them were only a few steps apart. Looking at the back of the other party's big head, the scout licked his lips with bloodthirst. It was as if he could already see blood blooming there. His body tensed up. Suddenly hiss. Before the scout could attack, a shallow sound pierced through the air. Then, he seemed to have seen something from the corner of his eyes. There was a blade light. Not good. It was a trap. The scout's heart was cold. He understood that the figure in front of him was just a bait. He had moved here, but he had delivered himself to the door. He kicked his legs and turned sideways. The scout tried his best to dodge to the side, but he was already in despair. His reaction was too late. His neck felt cold. Bang! The scout rolled a few times on the ground and stood up. The first thing he did was to touch his throat, and there was blood on his hand. Even though the scout believed that he had a calm temperament, he could not help but feel wild joy in his heart as he laughed heartily. It turned out that although there was blood, it was only a superficial rupture. The throat inside had not been cut. Newbie, definitely a newbie. The scout made a clear judgment of the ambusher in his mind. He's still not dead? The black shadow holding the heavy sword exclaimed in surprise. He quickly rushed over and slashed down. Seeing that it was just an ordinary attack, without the slightest trace of fighting energy, he was shocked. The scout felt a wave of calmness in his heart. This should also be a rookie. With 2 quick backflips, the scout dodged the attack. He even cut a piece of cloth from his sleeve and tied it around his neck. He was almost killed by 2 rookies. This was really unforgivable. The 2 people who were called rookies were David and Michaud. During the day, the team was driven away. At night, Tang and brought the 2 of them out to counterattack. In the complicated environment of the jungle, the pursuers had to chase through the night. Naturally, they had to send a large number of scouts to determine the direction of the Gray Coat army. These scouts were Tang Un's target tonight. After designating a target for the two of them, Tang Un went elsewhere. Judging from the current situation, the two of them could be said to be at a disadvantage. Misho walked out of the grass with a slightly gloomy expression. Their plan just now was not bad, but his last strike was not in place. The scout waved his short sword and attacked. With a few agile movements, he forced David into a panic. Misho immediately rushed forward. With a flick of his wrist, the short sword instantly slashed out 3 attacks, landing on the scout's vital points. The scout's eyes narrowed as he slashed back with his short sword. Ding, ding, ding. With a wave of his hand, a few sword shadows swept away the short sword. Then, his figure instantly closed in, and the short sword went straight for Misho's throat. Slit my throat? I'll let you know what a professional throat slit is. There was no doubt that compared to David, the scout hated Misho more. Ding! Misho pulled back his short sword and blocked the attack of the short sword. His speed is quite fast, but it's not enough. Chi, chi, chi. The short sword in the scout's hand was like a phantom, instantly covering Misho with layers of sword light. Ding, ding, ding. Misho kept retreating, his eyes calm as he saw every illusion, and then he waved his sword to block. How dare you run away? David stepped forward and slashed the scout's waist with his heavy sword. Damn it, was I running away? Hearing David's words, the scout, who was in the middle of a fierce attack, felt a little disgusted. This was too shameless. The scout waved his short sword repeatedly, drawing David into his attack range. The three of them rolled over the jungle and fought. David and Misho were not the scout's opponents alone, but the two of them together. One was strong and heavy, and the other was fast and agile. They just happened to be able to block the scout's attacks. These two. After fighting for a few minutes, the scout was a little surprised, but he immediately threw this thought away. You don't even have a bit of dochi, and you still dare to come out and mingle. Rookies will always be rookies. Let me end you all. At this time, David raised his heavy sword. The scout jumped up and stepped on the back of the sword. Then he opened his hands and jumped up like an eagle. Rookies, watch and see. When he reached the top, the scout's body flipped upside down, and then a black light suddenly appeared on his short sword. The light flowed and then rushed down to attack David. This was the symbol of a beginner warrior. The scout was absolutely confident that this move could break the defense of the heavy sword in one fell swoop and then kill the opponent. Well, what's that? The scout blinked and saw the thin young man with the short sword take out a crossbow. Damn it! The bowstring vibrated slightly, and an arrow instantly shot up into the sky. The scout's body in the air was a target, and he didn't have the ability to change his position in the air. Unable to dodge, he shook his wrist and formed a black sword shadow. Bang! The wooden arrow shattered, and the scout's body also lost its cool from the impact and fell down. Haha, what a rookie! Shooting at me at this time. Aren't you waiting for me to block it? If you change direction, I won't be able to dodge. Without waiting for the scout's joy to fade, a yellow light suddenly flashed in the corner of his eyes. Looking down, he saw a heavy sword covered in a thin yellow light waiting for him. That's Dochi? The scout was shocked and angry. How could it be? Where did the Dochi come from? Why didn't he use it before? It was no wonder that the scout had such a big reaction. His black Dochi had just been broken by the crossbow arrow, and now it was impossible to gather the Dochi of a beginner warrior in a hurry. The scout adjusted his body and once again threw out his short sword. There was also a thin layer of black light on it. Bang! Their Dochi was about the same, so it was a competition of strength. Without a doubt, David could leave the scout in the dust. The short sword flew out, and his arms swung open. At this moment, the scout was wide open. At this time, hiss! A flash of blade light appeared on the scout's neck again. This time, Misho had no choice but to hit, because the scout's body fell, as if he had delivered himself to the ground. Bang! Blood bloomed, and the cloth was torn. The scout's body was lying on the ground, but his head was facing up. There was only a layer of skin between them. His eyes were wide open, full of unwillingness. TSK. This guy was fighting well. Why did he suddenly jump so high? I don't know. Michaud shook his head. Well, he should be a rookie. David gave a decisive evaluation. Not bad. Tang In said in a praising tone, wiping his dagger and turning out from behind a big tree in front of him. It's just that you guys are too slow. The scouts you attracted have been dealt with, and you guys are not done yet. The fight between the three of them just now had caused a lot of noise, and the scouts naturally heard the sound and rushed over. It was just enough for Tang In to encircle and attack the reinforcements. David, you're still too slow. In this case, no matter how much strength you have, it will be a waste. Well, when you practice your speed, think about how to lock onto your opponent. By the way, why didn't you use your fighting spirit when you started? I forgot. David touched his head and said embarrassedly. Tang In opened his mouth and was speechless. I knew it. How could this guy think of showing weakness to the enemy? Michaud, you still don't grasp the strength of your attacks well enough. Well, it's not a big problem. Just cut the throat more. Let's go to another place. The night is our protective color, and all kinds of feelings are our most trusted friends. Well, try to smell it. What do you feel? Well, it smells like spicy beef. Spicy. Is it the juice? You foodie? Well, yes, it's the spicy smell of the juice. Smearing it on can prevent ants from biting, but it will also expose your position. Let's go and deal with him. In addition to the weapons in hand, all kinds of things in the environment can help us kill people. Look, there is a small hole under the rotten leaves 5 steps behind the scout. He tripped just now, but he won't take it to heart. If someone attacks him now and forces him to keep stepping back, he will step on it again after 5 steps. At that time, his body will be exposed. Whoosh! Boss, you lied to me. He stepped back a few steps, but he didn't fall at all. You idiot! You have to attack from the front and make him go back the way he came. If you attack from there, even if he steps back 100 steps, he won't be able to step on it. Michaud, go and help him. I'll encircle the scout and attack the reinforcements. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 140. Throughout the night, Tang In led his 2 rookie subordinates and ran all over the place, mysteriously eliminating more than half of the pursuing scouts. Just as the old butler had said at the beginning, Tang In had a unique sense of concealment. In such an environment, there was almost nowhere for the scouts to hide. In the second half of the night, the other party's commander finally realized something. He no longer sent out scouts alone, but changed to small teams of more than 10 people. The teams were no more than 10 meters apart, and they advanced forward in a net-like formation. In this way, David and Michaud had no choice but to retreat. Therefore, the 2 of them changed from the initial practice mode to the observation mode, watching Tang Un sneak attack performance alone. This night was a long and painful night for the scouts who were sent out. They didn't even know what the other party looked like, but they found that their teammates were getting fewer and fewer. This feeling was desperate and sullen. Even if they wanted to go all out, they couldn't find anyone. In the end, the scouts were going crazy. More than a dozen people were cowering in a circle. Any wind or grass could make them tremble in fear. As for Tang In, the person involved, he didn't feel much. Just like work, doing anything too much would make one indifferent. Sneak attacks were a process, and killing people was just a natural result. No matter how long the night was, it would pass. Unknowingly, the forest was faintly lit up again. Tang Un and David retreated quietly, just like when they came. Sneak attacks during the day didn't make much sense. Although they could succeed if they spent more effort, the efficiency would be much worse. Moreover, if they weren't careful, there was the possibility of being surrounded. According to the hidden signs left behind, Tang In and the others caught up with the main group a few hours later. At this time, the people of the Gray Coat Army had not slept for 2 days and 2 nights. Although the pursuers behind them had not slept, at least they didn't have to worry about food for the time being. The Gray Coat Army couldn't do it in this regard. When they first entered the forest, most of the 2 pounds of beef had already been eaten. Now, everyone was tired and hungry, and their morale was extremely low. Sister Shay, I'm so hungry. Little Helen, I have a piece of beef here. Eat it quickly. Josiah squatted down and stuffed a piece of beef jerky into the girl's hand. Little Helen happily took it and bit into it like a puppy. After a while, she licked her lips and said softly, Sister Shay, are those bad kids still chasing us? Yes, but don't worry. Big Brother Tang and taught them a lesson last night. Josiah touched Helen's hair and said with a smile, Oh, then Brother Tang and should be careful. Little Helen clenched her fists. I heard that the bad guys are very powerful. They can release a huge saber aura. It's at least 5 or 6 meters in size. She spread her small hands with all her might, intending to show that it was very, very big. Haha, don't be afraid. There's still your sister Shia. I'm a magician, and my magic can travel at least 5 or 6 miles. I have no problem beating them up. Then Josiah tried his best to explain how many 5 or 6 meters were 5 or 6 miles, as if whoever was longer was more powerful. Little Helen's eyes lit up as she nodded continuously with a look of admiration. Tangan turned his head and couldn't help but chuckle when he saw this scene. After comforting the little girl, Josiah ran back and forth to encourage everyone. Her smile was bright, and her words were gentle. In contrast, the members of the Gray Coat Army were a little restrained at first, but the atmosphere soon became harmonious after a few words. After Josiah shed her magician halo, she was just a young girl. Everyone saw that she was so optimistic and cheerful, and they couldn't help but feel a little embarrassed for their discouraged appearance. Gradually, there was more laughter in the lifeless team, and the atmosphere became much better. TSK, this woman. Tangan could see the exhaustion behind Josiah's smile. It could be said that she was even more tired than most of the people here. A magician's body was weak, and traveling without sleep and rest like this, one could imagine the burden on her body. Tangan had seen her frowning and rubbing her legs before, and her eyes were slightly red. But after a while, she would clench her fists and reveal a bright smile, and then encourage everyone with an energetic look. They continued to walk, and when it was close to noon, something happened to the team. A well-built man suddenly fell backward while walking. At first, the people around him thought that he was too tired, but when they saw him foaming at the mouth, they knew that something was wrong. Darren and the others quickly walked over. At this time, the man had already started to convulse. Tang, in quickly pried, opened his mouth, and after checking, his expression changed. This man's tongue was already black, and in just a moment, it was already motionless. He checked his nose and neck. Tang and shook his head and said helplessly, He's done. He should be poisoned. Poisoned? How could it be? He just picked up something to eat. Amidst the shocked voices, a flustered young man said, He just found a few bunches of dark red berries, and he even gave me a bunch. Where is it? Tangan asked anxiously. That person immediately took out a bunch of small, dark red, oval-shaped berries from his pocket. There were thousands of plants in the alternate world, and Tang didn't know what this was. However, not knowing it didn't mean that there was no way to know if it was poisonous. Bring me a piece of salt. With that, Tangan used a dagger to cut up the berries, and the juice dripped onto a rolled-up leaf. Then, he took a small piece of salt from a woman and put it in. After a while, the salt changed color at a speed visible to the naked eye and was dyed red. Tang, inside. This is it. This thing is poisonous. Damn it, Sai. Darren punched his palm. Everyone shook their heads and sighed. Who would have thought that this bunch of unknown berries could take a person's life? Thump, thump, thump. The young man's expression suddenly changed, and he took a few steps back. You ate it too? I ate a few. Open your mouth. Tangan shouted and pinched open the young man's mouth. Hiss. The people around him gasped. They also saw that the tongue in the young man's mouth was already turning black. Tang quickly turned his head and looked around. He jumped up and picked up a few leaves from a big tree a dozen steps away. It was a bitter mulberry tree, an ordinary plant that could be seen everywhere in the north, and everyone recognized it. Chew it and swallow it. The young man chewed subconsciously. A bitter mulberry tree, He knew what it tasted like from the name. Swallow it, Tang Yin shouted anxiously. The young man couldn't care less about the bitter taste. His throat kept trembling, and he swallowed the leaf with a ferocious expression. In an instant, the bitter taste spread throughout his body like wildfire. His stomach was in turmoil. Wah! The young man bent over and vomited. Eat again. Food was scarce, and the young man didn't eat much to begin with. In the end, all that was left was acid dripping down. After repeating this 7 or 8 times, the young man couldn't take it anymore. He fell to the ground as if he had lost all his strength. His abdomen twitched, and his breathing was weak. Tang Yin checked and said, "Find a water source as soon as possible and let him vomit a few more times. After that, we'll see if he can survive." Darren nodded speechlessly. He knew that this was already the best outcome. Fortunately, the young man didn't eat too much. Otherwise, it would have been too late. They quickly dug a hole and buried the poisoned man. In such an environment, they couldn't be particular about anything. They could only ensure that his corpse didn't land in the stomachs of wild beasts. The team was silent in front of the burial ground for a few minutes before continuing on their journey. This time, the people who had learned their lesson didn't dare to eat anything casually. However, misfortune would never come alone. In the evening, the Gray Coat Army found a clean water source. After settling the poisoned young man, everyone was delighted to find that there were still some fish in the pool. However, at this moment, a few burly men rushed over. Immediately, Darren exclaimed, "What? Did you lose him? If you like this work, you're welcome to come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation." Chapter 141. What? He's lost. After the team rested at the pool, Borg split the remaining 200-odd men into 20-odd groups and spread out to look for food. This group of more than 10 people walked towards the east, but they didn't walk far before one of the members at the back disappeared. At first, they thought that he had accidentally gotten lost. However, when they spread out to look for him, they couldn't find him at all. Tang Yin patted Darren's shoulder and said, "Let's go and take a look." Darren's expression was very solemn. The Gray Coat Army had been reduced from 500-odd men to 300-odd men now. Almost 200 of them had been lost. Although it was all due to some irresistible reasons, and the team members had never blamed this captain who was always at the front of the battle, Darren still felt very uncomfortable. Leader Laosa had personally handed this team to him, but in the end, sighed with this guilty thought, Darren and the others arrived at the scene of the incident. It was an ordinary forest with trees growing in a disorderly manner. "It's here." The burly man who was leading the way pointed forward. Tang Yin nodded. He first checked the place carefully, then went around the periphery of the forest. In the grass, in the bushes. According to this burly man's description, Tang Yin already had an ominous feeling in his heart. He was all too familiar with this method. While the team was moving forward, he would follow them silently and kill the person at the back. He had used this method on the scout team the entire night. "How is it?" Darren asked anxiously. Shaking his head, Tang Yin frowned and said, "I didn't find anything." This was really strange. At first, Tang Yin thought that the scouts had come chasing after them, but now he eliminated this possibility. Because with the standards of those scouts, it was impossible for them not to leave any traces behind. Then everyone shouted for a while, but in the end, they still couldn't find the missing person. When they returned to the camp, dinner was already prepared. There was a bowl of fish soup with wild vegetables floating in it. They could drink the soup as much as they wanted. As for the fish, most of it was given to the injured. The news of a missing person had already spread. This meal was tasteless to everyone. Darren picked up the bowl a few times, then sighed and put it down. He stared blankly at the bonfire in front of him. "Uncle Darren, have some. Don't worry. Maybe he's just lost and will find his way back after a while." Josiah comforted. "I hope so." Darren picked up the bowl with a gloomy expression. At this moment, Mrs. Megan suddenly walked over with a panicked expression and said anxiously, "Darren, someone disappeared again." "Ha!" The porcelain bowl was crushed and the white fish soup spilled all over the floor. This time, it was a woman whose husband had lost his life during the breakout in the valley. In the team, her job was mainly to cook. She said that her husband loved to drink the fish soup she made. Sob sob. She wanted to bring a bowl of fish soup to pay her respects, but she walked over there and disappeared in the blink of an eye. Sob sob. A woman sobbed in grief. Crack. Darren clenched his fists and walked towards the forest with an ashen face. At this time, Tang had already gone there first. The place where they were stationed was a small, open space. The edge of the forest was only a dozen steps away from where there were people. But in such a short distance, in such a short time, a living person actually disappeared just like that. It was the same ordinary forest, and there were no traces. Tang was really speechless. Damn it, there had to be some clues, right? Darren hurriedly searched for a while, but he didn't find anything. Whoosh! He pulled out his large sword with both hands, and the red light instantly covered the area. Come out! Boom! Amidst the angry roar, the big tree was cut in half. Come out! Come out and fight if you have the ability. Damn it, what kind of hero is hiding? Come out! Boom! 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 Darren was like a tyrannosaurus rampaging through the forest. Rows of big trees kept falling, and instantly, wood chips flew everywhere. It was a chaotic scene. Everyone looked at Darren, who seemed to have gone crazy, and lowered their heads in silence. At this moment, a white light suddenly flashed past the corner of Tang's eyes. Stop! With a loud shout, DeLuan stopped his sword. Tang quickly went forward and found a white porcelain bowl among the scattered branches. This thing had fallen from a tree that Darren had cut in half. Without a doubt, this should be the missing woman's bowl that contained the fish soup. At this moment, the fish soup was already gone, and there were no traces of the soup spilled in the surrounding area. Tang turned the porcelain bowl and used 2 fingers to pinch a strand of black hair from the side of the bowl. Darren walked forward and asked anxiously, "Did you find anything?" Tang handed over the oily black hair. "Come take a look. This is the hair of a wild beast. Could she have been taken away by a wild beast? Impossible. Wild beasts leave traces when they walk. Besides," Tang turned the bowl over. "Have you ever seen a wild beast drink soup from a bowl? Then did someone do it? It shouldn't be a human. This bowl is so clean. It's obvious that it has been licked properly. That's why there's black hair. If it's not a human, it's not a wild beast." Darren was anxious. Then what the hell is it? "I don't know." Tang narrowed his eyes. "But we could try to make it come out by itself." Soon, the team set off again. After walking for a while, there was a woman who was holding a child. She seemed to be exhausted and slowly dragged behind them. "Look if you want. You don't have to be so sneaky." Sorry. Tang, I didn't do it on purpose." "Yeah, I know. You definitely did it on purpose." The woman and child were Josiah and Tang who had shrunk his bones. It was a silent sneak attack without leaving any traces behind. Furthermore, it knew to target the weak and alone ones to attack. No matter what species the hidden thing was, one thing was certain. It definitely had intelligence. How could they not disguise themselves to lure such a creature out? "I just feel that you're weird like this," Josiah said as he bit his lip. "Weird?" Tang looked at his body. "Oh, it's the clothes, right? I found it at the last minute. It's a size too small." "I mean your body. You can actually become so small." "About that, I'm a killer. Well, an assassin. Sometimes I need to kill some women who are overflowing with maternal love, or some children like them. It's easier to get close to them like this." Tang looked around and said casually, "Not at all. I've said it before. Tang is a good person." Josiah was stunned for a moment before he laughed. Tang raised his eyebrows. "I think I've said it before, too. I'm not. Well, for example, the soldiers chasing behind us. They may be good fathers in the eyes of their children, good husbands in the eyes of their wives, good people in the eyes of their neighbors. But from our point of view, they are bad people, so we have to kill them. Well, I've killed a lot of them. Am I still a good person?" Josiah was silent. "Actually, I think your name is good. The Gray Coat Army." Black and white are purely in the color spectrum. In reality, everything is gray. Actually, that's not what the gray coat army means. It's talking about the civilian army in gray clothes. Well, I'm just giving an example. After a moment of silence, Josiah said, Tang, I think what you said makes sense. But I'll continue to support the reform, even if I have to kill a lot of such soldiers. Because if we succeed, more people will benefit from it. TSK. That's why I say that people with ideals are terrible. Tang Yin smacked his lips and chuckled. Me? Terrible? I'm useless. Josiah lowered his head and said in a low voice. Tang Yin was surprised. Oh, why do you think so? I can't help with anything. I'm clumsy. I can't cook, and I can't tell which food is not poisonous. Although I'm a mage, I can't kill many people in a real battle. Phew! At this point, Josiah let out a long breath and said self-deprecatingly, See, the more I say, the more useless I feel. That's what you think. Tang Yin was stunned and then laughed. Then where did you put the work you've done these days? The morale of this team is low now, and the people are lax. If no one stood up to encourage them and arouse their spirits, they might have collapsed by now. I only know how to kill. Darren and Borg are not effective, so you're the only one who's the most suitable to motivate them. Well, don't underestimate your own strength. Josiah opened his mouth and was stunned. Was he that useful? Don't stop, keep walking. Well, besides, you're very brave. When I said I needed someone to cover for me, you immediately stood up and didn't listen to anyone else. Huh. At this point, Tang Yun's eyes suddenly narrowed and he laughed. Is it finally here? This kind of targeted killing intent. It can't be wrong. I believe in Tang. Josiah came back to his senses and laughed softly. Huh. I'm deeply honored. I'm telling the truth. Seeing Tang Yun's casual reply, Josiah emphasized, just like now, I was a little nervous at first, but after chatting with you for a while, I feel much better. You're not nervous now? Well, no. Tang Yun nodded with a strange expression on his face. Then what if I say that the thing is not more than 10 steps behind us? Josiah paused for a moment. Whoosh! The sound of rapid wind came from behind. He stepped to the side and spun. Josiah was thrown in the direction of the team by a soft force, and Tang Yun instantly turned around and flicked out his dagger. Ding, ding, ding. The sound of collisions like a storm of pear blossoms was heard densely in an instant. Two black shadows were entangled together like ghosts, and it was impossible to distinguish one from the other. Bang! This kind of fast fighting style did not last for more than a few seconds. It was as if they were hit hard, and the two figures came together and separated. Crack, 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 rip. A figure exploded in the air, and then pieces of clothes drifted down. Tang Yun landed on the ground, took 3 steps back, and steadied himself. The other black shadow landed on the opposite side, rolled a few times on the ground, and stood up. It was a humanoid creature with a slender tail behind it. Its body was thin, and its waist was hunched, and its body was covered in long black hair. Its hind legs were short and stout, but its 2 front claws were very long and reached the ground. Ghost Vermin, Ji, the 4th sound. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 142. Ghost Vermin? What's that? Tang Yun was puzzled. Die. Suddenly, there was a loud shout. Just as the creature called Ghost Vermin landed on the ground, a person in the front pulled out a red sword and rushed out. When the Ghost Vermin got up, he had already reached it and slashed down. Needless to say, the one with such fighting spirit and momentum in the Gray Coat Army was Darren. Be careful, Tang Yun exclaimed. Although he didn't know what the Ghost Vermin was, he had already felt a strong threat in the short exchange just now. Otherwise, he wouldn't have immediately moved. The bone shrinkage skill moved bones, and the corresponding strength would be reduced. Did Darren know the Ghost Vermin? He often walked in the north, so he hadn't seen it, but he must have heard of it. However, his team members were disappearing one after another, and the murderer was right in front of him. The furious Darren didn't care so much. He would kill it first. When the Ghost Vermin saw the sword coming, It let out a strange cry and swung out its long front claws. Bang! In a loud collision, Darren rushed forward fiercely, but he was also pushed back quickly. In an instant, he felt a pain in his hand. He desperately tried to grab the sword, but it didn't fall out of his hand. "Captain, be careful!" he exclaimed. It turned out that the ghost vermin's black shadow flashed and moved in front of Darren in an instant. Its two front claws struck out again. Suddenly, a bloody light appeared from the side and slashed at the ghost vermin's body. The ghost vermin seemed to be a little afraid of this attack and quickly pulled back its front claws. Ding! Ding! Another two crisp sounds like metal clashing were heard. The attack was blocked. Then, the ghost vermin's body turned in the air and clawed at Tang Yin, who was rushing over quickly. Although it hadn't reached his body, it was already cold. Tang Yin didn't dare to be careless. He shook his wrist, and the bloodlines crisscrossed and slashed forward. Ding! Ding! Bang! Ding! Ding! Bang! The two figures fought in close combat in the air, as if they were defying gravity. Tang Yin naturally didn't reach the realm of floating in the air. He just relied on the small recoil force every time they collided to maintain his body. The situation with the ghost vermin was similar. In this special space, both sides wanted to suppress the other and gain the upper hand. On the other side, with a bang, Darren finally landed safely. Then, he looked at the sword in his hand and couldn't help but gasp. It turned out that there were 4-inch-deep claw marks on the back of the broadsword. This was solid iron. After all, Brother Tang, be careful. This ghost vermin is a natural assassin. Forest assassin? Had he finally met someone of the same trade after walking for so long at night? The airborne attack was naturally temporary. After about 10 seconds, both sides landed on the ground. In the end, neither side succeeded. If he couldn't do it in the air, the moment he landed was also an opportunity. She took a step forward. Chaotic flowers. The blood-red light instantly gathered and formed an oval core. Then, without waiting for the blood to bloom, the core-like shape shattered and tiny fragments of saber light were pushed forward. This was the result of Tang Yin forcefully activating flurry of flowers. When facing a low-level opponent, he could naturally slow down for 1 or 2 seconds, allowing the skill to fully display its power. But now that both sides were evenly matched, waiting for 1 or 2 seconds would be a waste of time. Although he didn't know what kind of creature this ghost vermin was, its combat talent was top-notch. It actually thought of the same thing as Tang Yin. As soon as it touched the ground, the black light on its body suddenly burst out. Then, 2 long plasticine claws overlapped and spun rapidly, forming a black cone. Bang, bang, bang. When the two attacks collided head-on, there were no more scattered crisp sounds. Instead, there were all kinds of explosive sounds. The blood-red saber light and the black cone were constantly canceling each other out at a speed visible to the naked eye. Finally, the dagger and the claws collided. Boom! A spiral wave of air burst out. The surrounding ground seemed to have been shaved off, and dust tumbled. The people more than 10 meters away couldn't help but cover their eyes with their hands and step back. At this time, in the center of the wave of air, the dagger and the claws separated. Hiss! Relying on the penetrative power of the blood energy, Tang Yin seized the opportunity to attack first. He stabbed the dagger at the ghost vermin's face. Unexpectedly, the ghost vermin suddenly lowered its body and flipped. As it dodged the attack, its long tail suddenly whipped out like a whip. Huh! Tang Yin laughed, and the dagger that seemed to be attacking with all its strength suddenly swung up lightly. Whoosh bang! There was a flash of blood, and a strip-like object flew out. Squawk! The ghost vermin instantly retreated with a cry that sounded like a damaged crow's vocal cords. Tang Yin also snorted, retracted his arm, and quickly retreated. Whoosh! The retreating ghost vermin's short and thick legs kicked the ground and retreated into the forest, disappearing in the blink of an eye. Huff, huff! Tang Yin took a few deep breaths and didn't immediately pursue. After a moment, the dust settled, and the people quickly gathered around. Where's the ghost vermin? Tang, how are you? Josiah asked with concern. Tang waved his hand and said, "It's okay. Nothing serious. You're injured." Josiah, with his sharp eyes, saw a bloody scar on Tang's arm. It's okay. That ghost vermin is much worse than me." Tang pointed to the half of its thin tail on the ground. Tang had been careful with the last attack just now and didn't use all of his strength. At this time, the ghost vermin indeed made a dangerous move, whipping its long tail from behind. The black meteorite iron dagger filled with blood was very powerful, and it instantly cut off half of the long tail. Of course, Tang also paid a price for this, and his arm was hit by the remaining tail. However, in comparison, Tang was undoubtedly at an advantage. "Brother Tang, sigh, why did you let run away?" Borg looked very worried. This ghost vermin is famous for being vengeful. Most of the people seem to have heard of the ghost vermin style, so after hearing Borg's words, they all looked worried. They weren't Tang and if the ghost vermin wanted to take revenge, it could be said that they had no power to fight back. "Borg, don't say that." Darren frowned and said, "Brother Tang has done enough. He even repelled the ghost vermin. Otherwise, the consequences would be unimaginable." Borg knocked his head. "Brother Tang, I'm sorry. I was too anxious just now." "It's okay. Well, I've always heard you guys talk about the ghost vermin, but I really don't know much about it. Can someone explain it to me?" After a pause, Tang continued, "Everyone, don't worry. The ghost vermin can't run away. I have a way to catch it." Finally, after Darren's simple explanation, Tang understood the situation of the ghost vermin. There is a saying in this strange world: there are beasts in the mountains and ghosts in the forest. The ghosts in the forest were the ghost vermin. It was born with the ability to hide, fast speed, and indestructible claws. All of these made it an assassin-like existence. In addition, it had a vengeful personality. It could be said that if you were targeted by it in the forest, the Grim Reaper's scythe would be raised. "I think the ghost vermin was targeting us from a pool." Darren sighed and blamed himself. "I was careless. The water in the forest is not easy to get close to." Darren's guess was correct. There were many water sources in the forest, but very few clean ones. These few clean water sources were where the various beasts in the forest drank. The Greycoat army was unlucky and happened to encounter the ghost vermin that wanted to drink water. Tang shook his head and said, "We went to the water source to save people." "Uncle Darren, you don't have to blame yourself. Okay, I know the general situation of the ghost vermin. You guys continue on your way. Just mark the path. When I'm done with the ghost vermin, I'll catch up with you." "Boss, I'll go with you." "Hey, Michaud, why are you dragging me?" Michaud turned his head and was speechless. Tang didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "You want to go? Then should I go kill the ghost vermin or save you? If you like this work, you're welcome to come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation." Chapter 143. Rustle, rustle, rustle. The grass was lowered and the trees retreated. Tang was like the night wind, rushing through the forest. The battle just now had ended with the ghost vermin retreating. Tang didn't give chase immediately. In fact, he had given up on the idea of keeping the ghost vermin there. This decision had nothing to do with strength. It was because of the Greycoat army members who were watching from the side. The ghost vermin ran extremely fast. It was almost as fast as Tang's normal speed. If it suddenly turned around and attacked everyone, Tang wasn't confident that he could stop it. So it was better to scare the ghost vermin away first, then plan his next move. After that, he found out from DeLuan that this ghost vermin was a vengeful person. After giving some instructions, he immediately gave chase. At first, he told everyone that he was confident in catching the ghost vermin. It wasn't a lie. One of the things he relied on was the killing intent skill. Killing intent. The killer's will, the target's nightmare. It could be used as a deterrent and tracking. He had started researching this skill in Lion City. He had been killed by the old butler's killing intent because of it. But the progress was not great. He had barely reached the beginner level and had been stuck there. This level could only be used to scare small birds. After using Ghost back once, Tang finally found some feeling of being in control of life and death. Then, he successfully raised the killing intent skill to the mastery level. The deterrence in this skill was easy to understand. Tang had used it a few times. It was just that the tracking seemed a little vague. Tang had tried to use the killing intent to envelop the birds and beasts, scaring them away. Then, he started to feel the position of these animals, but it was a little tricky. Usually, he would only get hit once or twice out of 10 times. Tang once thought that this skill was useless until his blood chi level increased again. As mentioned before, Tang's blood chi was close to 10,000 when the system released the mission of establishing the assassination department. After that crazy night of killing the scouts, it finally broke through the 10,000 mark, and his blood chi level increased to level 5. After leveling up, the special effect of his blood chi also changed, increasing to 5 times, and the explosive effect increased to intermediate level. In addition, there was an additional elementary internal intrusion. This additional special effect was Tang's second advantage. The so-called internal invasion was when the blood chi invaded the opponent's body and caused a second injury. This was easy to understand. It was just like how Tang's internal organs burned when he was hit by Bose's domineering fighting spirit. This was a skill that only high-level martial artists could understand. Now, Tang had finally reached this level. It had to be said that this was definitely a watershed in his strength. With the addition of internal invasion and killing intent, the tracking effect could be considered to be displayed. When Tang cut off the ghost vermin's tail, he naturally injected his blood chi into it. As long as this blood chi was not forced out by the ghost vermin, Tang would be able to roughly sense its location within a 10-mile radius. After walking for dozens of minutes, Tang slowed down. Then, he disappeared into the bushes and moved forward silently. Due to the level limitation, the current tracking could not pinpoint the exact location of the target. So when he got close, he still needed to slowly search. This process did not take long. Soon, Tang saw the ghost vermin on a big tree with luxuriant leaves. At this time, it was sitting on a branch, sticking out its long tongue to lick the wound on its broken tail. Just when Tang had discovered it, the ghost vermin suddenly raised its head. TSK, worthy of being a jungle assassin. Tang sighed and stood up from the bushes. He had planned to sneak attack just now, but this ghost vermin was really vigilant. Hey, good evening. Whoosh, rapid activation. Tang's figure burst out, leaving behind a trail of afterimages as he rushed straight to the tree. Well, this was called using peaceful means before resorting to force. When the ghost vermin saw Tang, its pair of slightly bright eyes in the dark suddenly widened. It was obviously shocked, and then its short legs kicked. Bang! The branch was hit by Tang in the air, but at this time, the ghost vermin had already jumped to a nearby tree. Twain slapped the tree trunk and pounced on him like a shadow. Squawk! The ghost vermin let out an unpleasant roar. It seemed that it had also recognized Tang, who had broken its tail. When enemies meet, their eyes would be exceptionally red. In an instant, its long claws swung over. Bang! It missed, but all the branches and leaves behind it were crushed by the claws. After dodging this attack, Tang stepped on the trunk and arrived in front of the ghost vermin in the blink of an eye. What followed was naturally a bit of frightening bloody light. The ghost vermin was not afraid and directly crossed its claws to meet it head-on. Ding, ding, ding. The bloody light was constantly shattered in the collision with the claws. The claws of the ghost vermin were probably the hardest part of its body. Even the dagger, made of black meteorite iron, could not take advantage of it. After shattering the bloody light, the ghost vermin followed up with another attack and clawed at Tang's left chest. Whoosh! The claw passed through his chest, and his figure gradually faded. The ghost vermin blinked and seemed a little confused. Why was a little different from usual? A ghost. As soon as the voice fell, more than 10 figures holding bloody daggers suddenly appeared around the ghost vermin. Ding, ding, ding. Bang. It was just a short trunk, and the space to dodge was narrow. After suffering such a dense attack, the ghost vermin finally gave Tang the opportunity to kick its body. In an instant, the ghost vermin fell from the tree, and Tang and jumped up. Bang! After the ghost face fell to the ground, it reacted very quickly and rolled back and got up. Suddenly, its eyes opened again. The figure that had leaped into the air suddenly split into 5 as it tumbled through the air. Then, 5 bloody lights passed through the space to kill in front of it. Empty kill. Puff squawk. This time the sound was very soul-stirring. The ghost vermin's body was hit again, and blood poured out from the hole in its chest. There was no good fighter, let alone a magical beast. Tang stepped on the ground and followed up again. At this time, the ghost vermin seemed to be afraid. After falling, it did not resist and turned away. Running? Let's see where you can run to. Tang instantly sped up and followed behind. Unfortunately, the ghost vermin was just a magical beast. Although it had some intelligence, it did not specialize in powerful attacks like humans. So, except for the black vertebral body, it did not have any other tricks. Usually, the ghost vermin mostly relied on its innate talent of stealth and strange sneak attacks. But these were also Tang old skills, so the ghost vermin could not gain the upper hand at all against Tang. Originally, if it could not gain the upper hand, it could ask for a draw or something. But how could Tang's system skills be for nothing? As a result, under a series of attacks, the ghost vermin was instantly defeated. At this time, the ghost vermin no longer had the demeanor of a jungle assassin. It just fled straight forward, no longer having the will to fight. But no matter how fast it sped up and turned, Tang could always follow closely behind. Even every once in a while, Tang could catch up with the ghost vermin and leave new wounds on it. This was the cooldown of the speed skill, squawk. Squawk, squawk. Twain and ghost vermin's figures gradually moved further and further away amidst the unpleasant cries that continued to be emitted. If you like this work, you are welcome to come Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 144. Bang, bang, bang. Aha, it's useless to hide. You can't leave tonight. Oh, you dare to come back. Your courage is commendable. You're courting death. Why bother? Aren't you tired after running for so long? Wouldn't it be better to just lie down? There are sounds of impact, teasing, and trees collapsing. Tonight, the forest was a little different from before. Although it was still dark, it was no longer peaceful. A large pile of grass and leaves were smashed, and 2 figures rushed out quickly. The one in front was a humanoid creature. Its body was covered with wounds and countless potholes of various sizes. The black hair on its body was almost stuck together by congealed blood clots. It looked really miserable. The one chasing behind, it was an ordinary-looking young man with a blood dagger in his hand. He also had several wounds and bloodstains on his body, but compared to the former, he was much better. Needless to say, they were the ghost vermin and Tang Yin. This high-speed chase in the forest had lasted for more than an hour. Although the advantage was obvious, Tang Yin looked at the ghost vermin in front of him and was somewhat shocked and speechless. In fact, the ghost vermin's injuries were more serious than it looked. From its constantly trembling body and the occasional screams, it could be seen that the blood that was constantly injected before was reacting. Tang Yin was well aware of the effect of the blood aura's invasion. It felt as if someone was using a small knife to continuously cut his internal organs and meridians. Even so, the ghost vermin's speed did not decrease at all as it continued to run away. Unknowingly, the external environment had changed a little. The species of trees around them gradually became monotonous. They were all some towering trees with thick branches that could not be seen at a glance. And what was surprising was that there were large, dark red flowers on the branches of these big trees. The wonders of nature were truly breathtaking. At this time, the ghost vermin running in front suddenly jumped on the trunk and jumped on a branch. It turned its head and looked directly at Tang Yin. Tang Yin could not help but be surprised. Did it not want to run anymore and wanted to fight to the death? The ghost vermin bared its teeth at Tang Yin fiercely, then grabbed a thick branch next to it and twisted it up and down, turning it into a stick and holding it in its claws. Oh damn! Tang Yin couldn't help but laugh. Don't think that just because you look like a human, You can use a stick to pretend to be a monkey. The ghost vermin naturally couldn't understand Tang's ridicule, but it suddenly grinned at him. Tang, and shuddered. He swore that this was definitely the ugliest smile he had ever seen in his life, bar none. The atmosphere suddenly became a little strange. Tang did not believe that this was a friendly gesture. Along the way, he had witnessed the cunning and treachery of the ghost vermin. Ambushes, sneak attacks, backstabs, and so on. It used them very smoothly. Tang sniffled. At this moment, he noticed an extremely strange smell around him. For a while, there was a faint floral fragrance that made people feel happy. After a while, there was an extremely fishy stench that made people want to vomit. What is this? Just when Tang was a little surprised, the ghost vermin suddenly made a move. It shook its hand, leaned forward, and swung its arm, the standard javelin throwing posture. Chi! Amidst the sharp sound of the air being torn apart, the wooden stick shot out like an arrow and pierced upwards. Tang suddenly looked up. Although the sky was dark, he could still vaguely see that there were many giant cocoon-like things hanging upside down above the dense branches. Bang! In his line of sight, the speeding wooden stick pierced through one of the cocoons. In an instant, the sound was like a hovering helicopter. Then, next to the swaying cocoon, a dense number of fist-sized black shadows appeared. Whoosh! Tang turned his head and saw the ghost vermin quickly retreating. Where do you think you're going? Although Tang still did not understand the ghost vermin's intention, he would never let it leave. Quick! His figure instantly shot out. Tang stretched out his dagger and stabbed the ghost vermin's back. Squawk! A scream. Huh? Tang frowned. The attack, just now, was not an exquisite move. With ghost vermin skills, whether it was dodging sideways or turning around to parry, he could easily deal with it. But the ghost vermin only tilted its body slightly, allowing the dagger to stab into it, and then continued to run forward. Wong. At this time, a large number of black clouds pressed down from behind. Could it be? A possibility flashed through Tang's mind. Could it be that the ghost vermin was afraid of these things behind it? At this time, Chi, a strong wind blew, and a chill ran down his spine. The ghost vermin in front suddenly ran to the right in a large arc, quickly evading. Tang, and also subconsciously rolled to the right. Bang, bang, bang. Tang turned his head and saw that the thick trunk on the left was full of holes the size of cow's eye. Then it hit the ground, and immediately a deep black hole appeared. Asterisk boom. Asterisk after shaking a few times, the heavily damaged tree collapsed. Damn! Tang immediately broke out in cold sweat. Even a crossbow wouldn't have such an effect. He now understood the ghost vermin's idea. It wanted to kill with a borrowed knife. But, damn it, do you think I'll let you go? While the speed skill was still active, Tang slapped the ground and jumped up in an instant. He ran side by side with the ghost vermin, and then the blood-red dagger went straight for the ghost vermin's head. The ghost vermin's body paused, and it had no choice but to parry with its claws. The body could be ignored, but the head was still needed. Ding, 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 they fought and ran at the same time. In an instant, dozens of attacks were exchanged. Both sides wanted to push the other side behind. The current situation was very clear. The one who fell behind was more likely to be attacked. Chi! The scalp-numbing sound was heard again. Tang and the ghost vermin did not hesitate to stop and rolled to the right at the same time. Bang, 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 boom, boom, boom. It seemed that the closer they were, the fiercer the attack this time. Rows of trees became the sacrificial lambs and kept falling down. At this time, Tang finally saw clearly what those fist-sized things were. They looked similar to bees, with a cold, sharp stinger on their tails. The only difference was that they had a slender needle in their mouths. As for the chaotic situation in front of them, it was probably the work of that sharp thorn. After rolling and standing up, Tang attacked the ghost vermin again without hesitation. It was as if he was going to die, or everyone was going to perish together. Squawk! Squawk! The ghost vermin screamed anxiously. Obviously, it knew how powerful these bee-like things were, so it wanted to run away. However, Twain's attacks were aimed at its vitals, so it had no choice but to block them. It looked like it was digging itself into the ground. Fighting and running at the same time, it was naturally not fast. In just a moment, the buzzing sound was deafening and the dark clouds were getting closer. Bang, bang, bang. Running through the forest and stepping on the grass, Tang In and the ghost vermin's attacks were not methodical. They were just blindly attacking. As long as the opponent's attacks were not aimed at their vitals, they would not care. The scene suddenly became tragic. At this time, the dark clouds were almost covering the sky. The ghost vermin screamed again and again, anxious. If it did not run, it would not be able to escape the range of its tail. However, Tang In was still indifferent. He calmly waved his dagger. Finally, swish, swish, swish. A large gust of wind covered a radius of dozens of meters. The ghost vermin could not stand it anymore and retreated. The two sides were so close. The ghost vermin suddenly withdrew its attack, and the star-like bloody light naturally went straight for it. Puff, 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 squawk, squawk, squawk. The ghost vermin screamed as blood spurted out of its body. The most serious injury was on its face. In order to avoid the attack on its head, it was stabbed in the eyes and blinded. Tang In's attack was successful, and he did not dare to be careless anymore. The dagger danced, and his figure suddenly disappeared. Storm, hiss. Red ripples spread out and gradually turned into a whirlwind. At this time, an overwhelming number of tail thorns descended. Squawk. The blind ghost vermin did not know where to hide. In an instant, it was hit by dozens of tail thorns. Its body trembled and fell to the ground. Not far away from it, a small red whirlwind suddenly formed. Bang, 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 the overflowing ripples shook off all the tail thorns and then slowly moved to the periphery. But soon, under the continuous attacks, the whirlwind's rotation became difficult. Its speed was constantly decreasing and decreasing. Boom! In less than 10 seconds, the whirlwind shattered and a shockwave spread out. Tang In's figure was thrown out. However, he was lucky this time. The direction he was thrown in was the periphery. Puff! After falling to the ground, Tang In opened his mouth and spat out a mist of blood. Then, without checking his injuries, he slapped the ground and was about to escape into the forest. Squawk! Suddenly there was a sad cry. Tang In turned around and saw the ghost vermin struggling to get up. Its body was densely covered with tail thorns like a hedgehog. What an abnormal vitality. However, this was also the ghost vermin's last cry, because those be-like things were constantly falling on its body. Then it raised the slender needle in its mouth and stabbed. The corner of Tang In's mouth twitched. He did not dare to look anymore and quickly hid in the depths of the forest. A portion of the buzzing black cloud behind him split off and chased after him. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 145. Early in the morning, in the jungle. When these two words were combined, it would always make people think of nature, the sound of birds, the fragrance of flowers, the dawn, and so on. But in reality, damned damp weather, damned jungle mosquitoes, damned lowly people. The middle-aged man rubbed his bloodshot eyes and muttered curses. Then he looked up and saw half-lying soldiers everywhere, armor and weapons scattered all over the ground, and even the rising smoke seemed to be a little listless. Sigh, when do you think these days will end? A few soldiers leaning against a tree chatted. What's the use of asking us? Ask those officers who don't know what's going on in their minds. A soldier said angrily. Sigh, I'm just asking. Don't be angry at me. The soldier looked very innocent. So what if I'm angry at you? You. All right. What's there to argue about? A slightly older soldier raised his voice slightly and glanced at the two of them. Then he said, they probably have to annihilate the Gray Coat Army before they can go back. Annihilate? We've been chasing them for 3 days, but we haven't seen a single hair on them. That's right. Didn't you say that the Gray Coat Army had no food? How could they run so far without food? F asterisk CK. Can you not mention food? There was a moment of silence. At this moment, a soldier straightened his body slightly and said mysteriously, "Let me tell you a piece of news. I have a friend who's in logistics. He said that the reason why our food was halved was because the food had been burned in the fire." What? Are you serious? Didn't they say that the supply would be restored in 2 days? Good morning, sir. The few chatting soldiers turned their heads stiffly and saw the middle-aged man standing behind them with an expressionless face. On the other side, an officer walked over and bowed to greet him. "All of you are very free, spreading rumors here." The few soldiers stood up in a panic and stood upright, not daring to breathe loudly. "Since you're so free, then transfer to the scout team." After saying this, the middle-aged man waved his hand and left. Scout team? More than half of the scout team had died in one night. The few soldiers turned pale. "How is it?" the middle-aged commander suddenly asked after walking for a while. The officer who had greeted them earlier had been following behind them. When he heard this, he immediately said, "They're still running, but there are no traces of them cooking last night." Yes, the middle-aged commander did not show any expression, as if he had already expected this answer. "Sir, it's been 3 days we chase," the middle-aged man said decisively. "But we only have 3 days left with half of our food supply. If this goes on, we might not be able to get out of the forest. Then we'll cut the supply by half." This, the officer hesitated. In the end, he didn't mention the possibility of a mutiny. The middle-aged commander looked into the distance. "Those untouchables can run for 3 days without food. Why can't we?" The officer fell silent. He knew very well what his superior was thinking. The Gray Coat Army was not far ahead of them, and they had already run out of food. Perhaps if they waited another day, or even half a day, the other party would collapse. But hadn't they already had this thought when they entered the forest? Now 3 days had passed, sir. Sir. Suddenly, a soldier dressed as a scout rushed over from behind. The middle-aged commander frowned slightly. Could it be that the scout team had been wiped out again? The scout came closer and saluted. "The Gray Coat Army has set up camp in front. They are building fortifications." The middle-aged commander and the officer looked at each other. For a moment, they couldn't believe their ears. "You, say that again." The Gray Coat Army has stopped." "They good?" The middle-aged commander roared and interrupted the soldier's words. He took 2 steps to the left and right. They finally can't hold on any longer? This group of untouchables. Pass down my order. The team is to gather immediately and advance at high speed." "Sir, but breakfast. The Gray Coat Army is our best breakfast." With the order, the army immediately set off. The middle-aged commander rode on his horse and first sent out a scout team to gather information. Then, he sent an officer to urge the soldiers to advance faster. Who knew if this group of untouchables would suddenly run away again? 20 miles, 10 miles, 5 miles, 3 miles. The few hundred men of the Gray Coat Army finally appeared in the line of sight of the pursuers again. The jungle environment was naturally filled with trees. However, in the place where the Gray Coat Army was stationed, the trees, grass, and shrubs were all cut down, forming a huge open space. As for the trees that were cut down, they were all piled up to form bunkers on all sides. After the pursuers arrived, they didn't attack immediately. Instead, the 2 wings advanced first, wanting to surround the camp. The Gray Coat Army was indifferent to this. They continued to build bunkers, looking like they were ready to fight to the death. Seeing that the soldiers had completely surrounded the Gray Coat Army's fortifications, the middle-aged commander finally felt relieved. Accompanied by a group of officers, he came to the front of the team. Are these untouchables idiots? What are they thinking? They actually built their fortifications in a depression. They want to fight to the death now, so they didn't leave a way out. The middle-aged commander thought that he had understood the Gray Coat Army's intention, so he felt even more at ease. It seemed that this group of Gray Coat Army knew that they had no hope of escaping, so they wanted to fight one last time. "This fortification is too big," an officer beside him observed and said in surprise. The Gray Coat Army only had about 300 people, but the fortifications they built could almost accommodate twice the number of people. Of course, the bigger the camp, the better. After all, the bigger the area, the deeper the defense. If there wasn't a corresponding number of people, it would be easy to break through. A bunch of unruly people. What do they know about military affairs? I guess they think that they are encircling their own backyard. Naturally, the bigger the better, the officer mocked. Haha, that's true. As they chatted and laughed, everyone commented on the Gray Coat Army's fortifications. The content was naturally all kinds of ridicule and mockery. It was no wonder that they were so relaxed and confident. Everyone was in the military and was an expert. Naturally, they could tell that this fortification was not even worth a single blow. 10 minutes? 15 minutes? That was probably the case. The middle-aged commander was also smug. He looked at the officers and said, "All generals, listen up. Excuse me. The water is hot. Excuse me. The officers turned their heads and saw a soldier in plate armor constantly shouting as he jogged in from outside the encirclement. How could a battle formation allow anyone to barge in? So many team leaders scolded him. However, this soldier turned a deaf ear and kept walking inside. Finally, someone couldn't hold it in and tried to take him down. However, this soldier's figure was really slippery. He turned left and right in the team like a loach, making it impossible for anyone to catch him. The noisy scene looked a little funny. The surrounding soldiers were a little dumbfounded for a moment. The middle-aged commander's face was livid. The officers beside him looked at each other. Where did this clown come from? The Gray Coat Army's fortifications were quite large, so the encirclement of 2,000 people was not too dense. In addition, everyone was still in a daze. After a while, this soldier actually passed through just like that. Then he actually rushed toward the fortification. Under everyone's gazes, the soldier agilely climbed up the wooden fortification as if he was climbing a mountain wall. Finally, he jumped up lightly and flipped over. The Gray Coat Army immediately cheered. There was an awkward silence on the pursuer's side. What kind of situation was this, Few? The middle-aged commander took a deep breath and tried his best to suppress the anger in his heart. All generals, listen up. This time, no one interrupted him. It was the middle-aged commander who suddenly widened his eyes and stared blankly ahead. In fact, it wasn't just him. All the officers and soldiers were staring with their mouths agape. They saw a wisp of black smoke suddenly rise from the fortification, followed by another wisp. Soon, the thick smoke seemed to have taken shape and billowed into the sky. At this moment, there were faint flames on the wooden bunkers. This was a mass suicide? To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 146. The fire in the bunker of the Gray Coat Army was getting bigger and bigger. Layers of heat waves, billowing smoke, and the sound of wood cracking could be heard. All of this made the soldiers a few hundred meters away open their mouths wide. After a moment, the middle-aged commander came back to his senses and sighed with a complicated expression. Logically speaking, he should be excited. After all, the group of scum that he had been chasing was finally going to be wiped out. However, he found that his feelings were somewhat complicated. Well, this feeling was like accidentally meeting a pure and beautiful goddess-like person on the street. After struggling for a long time in his heart, he finally mustered up the courage to strike up a conversation with her after following her all the way. In the end, the goddess gently smiled and said 5 silver for a single session and 10 silver for a night. A bit melancholy. Buzz, forget it. The middle-aged commander shook his head and got rid of these thoughts. In the end, he still won, didn't he? Buzz, what was that sound? The noise that was getting louder and louder finally attracted everyone's attention. They looked around, and all of their eyes collectively moved to the west. It seemed to be coming from that direction. Wasn't that the direction that the strange soldier came from? Buzz. As it got closer, the sound began to become a bit deafening. The soldiers looked at each other. It was a bit noisy. At this time, The middle-aged commander suddenly had an ominous feeling. After all, he had been on the battlefield and more or less had a premonition of danger. Pass down my order. Archers, get ready. Head west. Yes. An officer took the order and left. After a moment, the archers turned around and pointed their arrows to the west. Buzz, buzz, buzz. Woo! The soldiers' eyes instantly widened. They saw a black cloud pass over the top of the trees in the west, covering the sky and the sun as it rushed towards them. Taking a closer look, it wasn't a cloud. It was clearly a pile of dark brown bee-like things. The fist-sized body, the slender needle, the shining stinger, God, devouring bees. Suddenly, a heart-wrenching voice sounded from somewhere. Devouring bees? Devouring bees. When everyone heard this name and looked at the black cloud, they suddenly trembled and their courage was shattered. If there was a list of dangerous creatures in the jungle, then the devouring bees would definitely be on the list. Their sharp-tailed stingers were indestructible, and their long and thin needles sucked human flesh. What was even more terrifying was that these creatures always appeared in groups. In a large group, even high-level magical beasts would have to retreat. And now, what appeared in front of the pursuers was more than just a patch of black clouds. Fire arrows, fire arrows, fire arrows. The middle-aged commander didn't care how far away he was from the archers as he kept shouting. Fortunately, the officer on the other side also reacted and waved his hand to order the attack. Swish, swish, swish. The bowstring vibrated, and a large number of spinning arrows whizzed toward the clouds. With so many targets packed together, it was basically impossible to miss. After a round of arrows, yes, of course it was effective. Many black dots fell from the sky. However, the clouds were still clouds. It was as if the attack just now was just scratching an itch, not worth mentioning at all. Release the arrows, release the arrows. The middle-aged commander was still shouting. The number of arrows in the second round was much lower because the soldiers below were constantly retreating. Run quickly. A shout came out of nowhere, as if it had awakened something. The scene immediately fell into chaos. The soldiers cried and threw down their weapons and took off their armor, hoping to run faster. Stop, don't retreat. Where's the supervisor? Whoever retreats will. The middle-aged commander couldn't shout anymore because he found that the one running at the front of the deserters was the supervisor. This was normal. The supervisor was originally standing at the back of the team. If it was on the battlefield, if a soldier retreated, they would come forward to kill him. But now, facing these man-devouring bees, even a supervisor army was frightened. In the end, he was the first to run away. The devouring bees' flying speed was not slow, and soon they were behind the pursuers. The black cloud paused for a moment, and then, chee, 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 a hair-raising sound was heard, and the stingers were shot down at a speed that was invisible to the naked eye. Zong! The middle-aged commander pulled out his sword and stared at the sky. Escape? The middle-aged commander didn't think about this problem. This didn't mean that he was brave in battle. But how could ordinary people outrun the flying, devouring bees in the jungle? Set the fire! Set the fire! The devouring bees are afraid of fire. An officer suddenly shouted loudly. The devouring bees were notorious. After the soldiers recognized them, the first thought that flashed in their minds was to escape. They forgot that the devouring bees also had a weakness. Their wings were as thin as feathers and would melt when exposed to fire, so they never went close to places with fire. The middle-aged commander's heart moved, and then he was disappointed. It was too late. Even if he had just discovered the devouring bees, it was too late. A bolt of lightning flashed through his mind. The huge wooden bunker, the soldier, the devouring bees, the fire. The middle-aged commander stiffly turned his head in the direction of the Greycoat army. These lowly people, bang, bang, bang. The stingers poured down. Help! The physique of the soldiers was naturally not as strong as the ghost insects. Even if they wore armor, it was as thin as paper in front of the stingers. Chest, thighs, head, it was pierced. With such a dense attack, as long as they were in the coverage area, there was almost no way to survive. Every scream represented the death of a life. Not long after, this place became a sea of blood and corpses, and it was far from over. The devouring bees advanced again, chasing the soldiers who fled into the woods. At this time in the burning bunker, the Gray Coat Army was lying in the middle of the depression with wet cloth. Although the heat wave was hot, it was uncomfortable. But when they heard the screams outside, they still felt that this was a pleasure garden. TSK, Brother Tang, how many devouring bees did you attract? There are so many screams, Darren said as he listened to the commotion outside. I don't know, they just ran. Well, I set fire to the tree where they lived. Tang Yin, who was wearing a soldier's armor, touched his nose and said. The Luan was speechless. No wonder the devouring bees chased them so far. It turned out that Tang Yin had destroyed their hive. Josiah covered the wet cloth and said in a muffled voice, Uncle Dylan, can these devouring bees really destroy all the soldiers outside? They're completely destroyed, cough cough. DeLuan choked on the smoke and immediately covered his mouth with the wet cloth. Josiah, you don't know how powerful they are. These devouring bees. You'll know when the fire is extinguished. After a pause, DeLuan reached out and patted Tang Yin's shoulder. Brother Tang, I won't say any more words of thanks. From now on, I'll leave my rotten life in your hands. Tang Yin was stunned and then smiled bitterly. Uncle DeLuan, what are you saying? You recognized these devouring bees. The plan was arranged by Borg. I was only responsible for leading the way. The truth was more or less the same. Last night, Tang Yin ran for a few hours in the forest before he managed to shake off the pursuit of the devouring bees. Then he found his way to the camp and told everyone that the ghost vermin was dead. Then he briefly explained the situation. In the end, DeLuan recognized that these terrifying bee-like creatures were the infamous devouring bees. Then, Borg came up with the idea of luring the bees to attack the soldiers. Brother Tang is too humble. If it weren't for you, even if we wanted to lure the bees to attack, we wouldn't be able to. DeLuan was speaking the truth. If they didn't have Tang Yin's speed and still provoked the devouring bees, they would definitely die on the way. At this point, Tang Yin could only shrug and smile without saying anything. The wooden bunker more than 10 meters away was still burning. It would probably take a few hours for the fire to be extinguished. Thus, everyone listened to the screams outside and chatted casually. It was a joyous atmosphere. Inside the fire and outside the fire, it was like two completely different worlds. If you like this work, you're welcome to come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 147, Brand Calendar, Winter of Year 555, Imperial Royal Military Order. All armies and lords in the north are to immediately send troops to eliminate the Gray Coat Army. Not counting the small skirmishes, this was the 6th time that the brand had officially announced the elimination of the Gray Coat Army. No one knew if they would succeed this time, or if they would fail like the previous 5 times. Northern Grand Border City, Central Building. A middle-aged military officer with a handsome posture made 7 or 8 turns in this conjoined building before finally stopping in front of a house guarded by 2 soldiers. The soldiers obviously recognized this officer. They saluted and left. The middle-aged officer nodded and pushed open the door. The room was in a mess. The purple-clothed man sitting behind the innermost desk raised his head. Oh, Ralph is here. Marshal. The middle-aged officer saluted and asked, Marshal, are you looking for me? There is only one marshal in the Grand Border City, and that was the Zechen Legion's Marshal, Z. Yes, have you heard the news that the Bran Empire is going to eliminate the Gray Coat Army? Z nodded. I've heard about it. Ralph said calmly. Yes, the Zechen Legion will send out 8,000 people this time. You will lead them. Okay. Ahem. Z coughed twice and said, the situation this time is special. In a month, the northern wilderness tribes will invade our borders. So, we have to at least make sure that the Gray Coat Army can't threaten our rear. Yes, Lei Er Fu answered without hesitation. as if this was a normal thing. It will be Grace Day in a few days. Yes, I will go with you to the rear. Ralph, who had been expressionless, was confused. Marshall, you are going too? Although the existence of the Gray Coat Army made the brand uncomfortable, it was just uncomfortable. In most people's hearts, it wasn't a big deal. In the previous few encirclements, they had never seen a marshal personally leading an army. Hee, I finally see a different expression on your face, although you still speak very few words. Ralph, smile more when you have nothing to do. Don't always let people secretly call you the facial paralysis general. Z chuckled. His face was full of satisfaction. Lei Erfu remained silent, as if he was protesting silently. You again? Z shrugged with a helpless expression. I'm going to the rear for something else. Lei Erfu nodded. All right, that's all. You can leave now. Seemingly bored, Z shook his head and waved him away. Yes, sir. Lei saluted again and left the house. Z opened his purple lips and revealed a rare, complicated look in his eyes. Finally, he bent over. Cough, cough. At the same time, the Thunder Legion and the Ash Flame Legion also began to deploy their men. As for the 4 feudal lords in the north, there was no movement at the moment. No matter what, another mighty encirclement against the Gray Coat Army was about to begin. Of course, the wind and rain outside had nothing to do with the Gray Coat Army in the forest for the time being. Most of the fires in the bunkers had been extinguished, leaving only black smoke billowing in the air. Bang! With a loud bang, the charred tree trunk was forcefully blasted open from the inside. Smoke and ashes flew everywhere. Cough, cough. Continuous coughing sounds could be heard. One figure after another quickly ran out from inside. The first thing these people did when they came out was to take in big breaths of fresh air. Damn it, if we stay any longer, we'll really be cooked. Darren panted heavily and kept wiping his sweaty forehead. Yeah, if I knew this would happen, I would have built a bigger one. Tang, and pinched his clothes and a trail of water came out. Haha, that's right. Darren laughed loudly and looked into the distance. Brothers, let's go over there and take a look. Naturally, everyone agreed in unison. Was there anything more satisfying in this world than seeing your enemy in trouble? Looking from afar, it was a messy scene. The ground was littered with weapons and armor, extending all the way to the surrounding forest. Needless to say, this was probably the escape route of those soldiers. But ordinary people in the forest trying to escape from the man-devouring bees? Well, unless his mother gave birth to him with 4 legs, everyone kept pointing and guessing the fate of those soldiers. They cheered from time to time. They had reason to be excited. After all, they were almost forced to dead in these few days. Scarce food, never-ending march, groggy heads due to lack of sleep. Now that they thought about it, they didn't know how they survived these few days. The place where the pursuers were arranged was still some distance away from the bunker of the Gray Coat Army. As they continued to move forward, the cheers of the crowd gradually decreased. The atmosphere became a little strange. A color gradually reflected in everyone's eyes. Bright red, dark red, dark red. How much blood was there from more than 2,000 people? No one knew, but this piece of land was completely soaked. Then another color appeared. It seemed to be pieces of white cloth. They dotted the red land, making it stand out. Walking in, something was wrong. It seemed like something was missing. What was missing? This question appeared in everyone's mind. Tang's expression became strange. He stopped, swallowed, and said hesitantly, the pursuer should be dead. Let's not go and see. Why? Someone didn't understand. Let's see. If we don't see how these people died, how can we get rid of the hatred in our hearts? That's right. Tang spread his hands and didn't stop them. You asked for it. Don't blame me for not reminding you. The first piece of white cloth appeared in front of everyone, followed by the second. Ahem, Brother Tang is right. Let's not look. Darren's face was a little pale at this time. He looked at Tang with a complicated expression. Then Borg seemed to have thought of something, and his face suddenly changed. He jumped away like a rabbit that had been shot. There was a piece of white cloth under his feet. Borg's fierce reaction attracted everyone's attention. Then everyone turned their eyes to the white cloth. This white cloth is a little strange. There are a few holes on it, and some hairs are stuck on it. There seems to be something under it, and it's slightly bulging. That's the same. Strange. Why are there shoes on it? Shoes? Shoes. Wah. Josiah suddenly bent over and vomited. Miss Josiah, what's wrong with you? David asked in confusion. He bent over and picked up the white cloth. Why is everyone looking at this white cloth? It feels good. This is a high-quality cloth. After spreading it out, the white cloth was as tall as David. It had sleeves, trousers, a nose, and no eyes. Well, almost at the same time, hundreds of people bent over and vomited. They vomited until they were dizzy, and tears and snot were flowing out. What is everyone doing? David was shocked by the scene in front of him. The corner of Misho's mouth twitched, and his throat moved twice. He calmed down and said to David expressionlessly, "This is human skin." Human skin? What kind of skin is that? Is it expensive? David asked curiously. Misho retreated. Misho, why are you vomiting too? Okay, David. Tang In walked over and said, "Throw it away." What a pity, this is human skin. David looked reluctant, but then he blinked and said, "Human skin? Wah." David suddenly knelt on the ground and vomited violently, as if he had taken a piece of charcoal. This guy's reaction speed. Tang In was speechless. At this time, except for Tang In, everyone in the gray coat army was leaning over and vomiting. Even Darren, who often claimed to have climbed out of piles of corpses, couldn't help but retch. I told you not to look. Everyone here had seen corpses before, but this kind of death. Most people knew that the devouring bees ate human flesh and blood. But who would have thought that they ate human flesh in such a particular way? They actually swallowed everything except bones, leaving only empty human skin. Phew! Tang In let out a long breath and walked away. Would his taste get worse and worse? Well, it's all the old butler's fault. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 148. As the saying goes, before the three armies move, the provisions move first. Although the Brand Kingdom's military order was to exterminate the Grey Coat Army immediately, it still took time to deploy the soldiers, transport the war preparations, and rush to the rear. Thus, it was only 3 days later that the Purple Star Army finally arrived at the gathering point for this operation. It was a flat, mountainous area, and the soldiers had already cordoned off the area. All kinds of flags were flying above the camp. Flames, plants, magic beasts. Counting carefully, there were actually 6 flags. The 2 legions and the troops sent by the 4 feudal lords were all present. The Purple Dawn Legion was the last to arrive. After settling the matters in the camp, a large group of people walked out of the Zeichan Legion's main tent and walked towards the center of the camp. The one walking at the front was a straight, expressionless soldier. From the style of his armor, he should be a general. Next to him was a middle-aged man who looked like an adjutant. As for the group of people behind him, their clothing was more complicated. They were generally younger. Some were wearing armor, some were wearing military uniforms, and some were simply wearing luxurious velvet robes. This group of young people seemed to be very curious. They kept pointing around the camp. The general in front just walked silently and didn't pay attention to them. However, the adjutant seemed to have a good temper. He smiled and said to the crowd, "Outstanding students of the Brand Kingdom's first military academy. This is the camp where the troops are stationed. You have to observe carefully. There's a lot to pay attention to. Don't let down the marshal's efforts. Brigadier General, don't worry. We won't disappoint the marshal." A young man stood up and said loudly, That's good." It turned out that this group of young people were the students of the Zeichan Legion. Before the troops left, Z handed them over to Ralph. He wanted them to see what the actual combat situation of the troops was like in this extermination battle. At this time, a rather arrogant young man walked out and said, "General, what is our mission this time? I wonder if we can personally lead the troops in a battle?" Ralph stopped and turned his head. After a moment of silence, he said, "Less talk, more observe. After that, he continued to walk forward. Ah, everyone was silent, and the young man's face was flushed red. Cough, cough. Actually, General, what you mean is... The adjutant looked like he was prepared and came out to save the situation. Not long after, the group of people arrived at the center of the camp, where a huge military tent was set up. Ha! We were just guessing who the Zechen Legion would send this time. I didn't expect it to be the Silent Eagle, General Ralph. Amidst the loud voice, a burly man with a black beard walked out with a smile on his face. Then, a middle-aged man with a sinister face lifted the curtain and walked out. He said in a strange tone, "Hee, it doesn't matter who comes. Who didn't know the name of the Zechen Legion? I'm afraid that even a small soldier would be stronger than all of us. To think that we've been waiting here for an entire day." General Baylor, Layer Fu nodded towards the robust man, ignoring the middle-aged man who came out later. "You." The middle-aged man's eyes widened in anger. "Hey, what's behind us?" General Baylor immediately stood between the two of them and changed the topic. Layer Fu was still expressionless. "Student." Student?" The adjutant immediately stepped forward and saluted. "Generals, this is an outstanding student from the brand 1st Military Academy. He came with us to observe and learn." Then, he turned around and gestured. "Students, let me introduce you. This is the Thunderbolts Army's battle formation Mad General, General Baylor. This is the Blue Flame Army's Northern Gray Wolf, General Gary." "Greetings, General." "Greetings, General." "Ah, good. Silent Eagle, battle formation Mad General, Northern Gray Wolf." The generals who were named were naturally not small characters. In fact, they were the main forces of each army. From this, it could be seen that the Brand Kingdom placed great importance on this encirclement. With Layer Fu, who was an expert in awkward situations, there was naturally no need for small talk. Everyone entered the tent together. After settling down, the three generals exchanged information. The Zechen Legion brought 8,000 soldiers, the Thunderbolts Army brought 10,000 soldiers, and the Blue Flame Army brought 10,000 soldiers. The three armies sent a total of 28,000 soldiers. While they were chatting, another 4 people in armor walked in and saluted Layer Fu. Needless to say, these 4 people were the generals sent by the 4 lords of the north. Now, all the generals of the Gray Coat Army were present. Next was the official military meeting, but in fact, the meeting didn't last long. A few generals surrounded a huge map, and like dividing a cake, they decided on their respective areas of elimination, and that was it. As for cooperation, what a joke. Who would be the leader? Who would listen to who? After the area was determined, Layer Fu stood up and nodded to everyone. Then, he turned around and left. The adjutant smiled bitterly and saluted to the generals. Then, he left with the military students. In an instant, the tent was emptied. The generals were a bit dumbfounded. Although the content of the discussion was over, you should at least be polite to each other and have a meal together to get to know each other. You are indeed the legendary general with facial paralysis, the general of awkward silence. Outside the tent, a student suddenly said, "General, I have a question to ask." Layer Fu turned around and said, "Speak. How many people are there in the Gray Coat Army?" 20,000. "Oh, only 20,000? The student was shocked. "Our 3 armies have close to 30,000 people. The 4 lords sent out another 30,000. Is there a need to fight this war? Oh, why didn't we succeed so many times?" "That's right. Isn't this just wasting the Empire's resources? No wonder after so many years, the Empire has never attacked the northern wilderness tribes." Layer Fu stared at the person who asked the question. Then, he turned around and walked towards the west. "Come. Cough, cough. Everyone follow. Soon, you will know why." The adjutant calmly explained. The students looked at each other and followed Layer Fu's footsteps. Naturally, the campsites were all planned out, and each troop had their own territory. They didn't walk far before they saw a wolf-head flag. Isn't this Lord Solomon's camp?" The students of the 1st Military Academy all came from prominent backgrounds. Most of their families were great nobles. They naturally recognized the flag of one of the four lords in the north, Duke Solomon. Actually, even though it was called a camp, if it wasn't for the two listless soldiers guarding there, you wouldn't even know where the camp gate was. Logically speaking, if strangers approached this important military area, there should be people coming up to stop them. However, the two soldiers looked up and saw a Air Foo's group coming down. They leaned against the wall and continued to doze off. Thus, the group smoothly walked to the center of the camp gate. Looking inside through the door, there were no guards patrolling, no soldiers training. Weapons were scattered on the ground. Armors were piled up at the side, and groups of soldiers mostly found a place to hide from the wind and gathered together. They were either happily shouting about money or talking about their big breasts, white thighs, and so on. This was a military camp? All the students were dumbfounded by what they saw. At this moment, a group of soldiers with bruises all over their faces walked to the gate of the camp. "Brothers, hurry up and help. Our people were beaten up by the rabbit-beak flower." "Air." All the soldiers turned to look at him. "F***, what? Do you want to die? See if I don't kill them." Hey, I won this round. Don't steal my money." After a moment of chaos, these soldiers hurriedly put on their armor, then took out wooden sticks as thick as an arm from who knows where, and rushed out of the camp towards the south like a swarm of bees. Rabbit-beak flower? Among the teams that came this time, the only one that could be considered a flower was Lord Hogan's three-leaf flower. 3 leaves? Rabbit-beak. Looking at the group of hooligan-like soldiers rushing past them, the students were once again speechless. "Understood," Air Fu asked calmly. Understood." The student nodded dejectedly. With soldiers like these as his companions, he didn't have to worry about not losing. Very good. Air Fu turned and walked towards the Zichan Legion camp. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 149. The chilly wind blew, pushing the gears of fate. Ahem, pushing the axis of time to spin round by round. In the morning, at the border of the jungle, a tall patch of grass kept making rustling noises. If you looked at it from above, you would think that there was a tiger approaching its prey. At this moment, suddenly, a pair of large hands stretched out from inside and pushed the grass aside. Behind the hands, was a wooden stick. Wait, let's turn back. Why don't these big hands have fingernails? Well, it turned out that these big hands were carved out of wood. The pair of artificial hands froze outside the grass for a few seconds, but there was still no movement around. After a moment, a huge head stretched out from inside. It turned out to be a burly man wearing animal skin and crawling. With such a large body, he was making such sneaky movements. This made people think of the word wretched. After the burly man poked his head out, he looked around carefully like a mouse that was about to come out of its hole. Suddenly, the burly man's eyes focused, and then his face was filled with ecstasy. Then he jumped up and ran back. "Haha, boss, mountain, I see the mountain." "Ha!" At this moment, a figure jumped out from the side like a ghost, and in an instant, a short sword was pressed against the burly man's neck. The burly man suddenly felt as if he had been electrocuted. He maintained his running posture and stood still. "David, I'm sorry, I won again." The short sword was put away, and a young man with a feminine appearance appeared behind him. "Michaud, you're cheating. Can't you see that I have something to talk to the boss about?" The burly man was obviously not convinced. "David, nothing is more important than your life." Another voice sounded. An ordinary-looking young man came out from behind a tree. His long and narrow eyes narrowed as he smiled. "Yes, boss," the burly man replied dejectedly, but then his face lit up with joy. "Boss, I see the mountain." "Yes, I see it." The young man nodded. Then he looked into the distance at the mountain range and muttered to himself, "Damn, we're finally out." These 3 people were Tang, Un, David, and Michaud. The Gray Coat Army finally heaved a long sigh of relief after they lured the bees to exterminate their pursuers. Also, the devouring bees don't eat food. Tang In specifically asked David and Michaud to pick out all the supplies in the miserable battlefield. One had to know that this was 3 days' worth of rations for 2,000 people. The Greycoat Army immediately had a blissful life, and they felt as if their hardships were finally over. Of course, David and Michaud didn't have much of an appetite in the next few days. Now that he no longer had to worry about being hungry, the next problem was how to get out of the forest. Naturally, they couldn't turn around and leave. Not to mention whether they could find their way here or not. They couldn't just walk right into the trap after killing more than 2,000 soldiers. After a short discussion, everyone decided to continue forward. The problem of direction was easy to solve. As long as the sun rose in the east and set in the west every day and observed the stars in the sky at night, they could always roughly determine a route. Finally, after exactly a week, Tang In and the others saw the mountains in the distance. It must be said that the Greycoat Army also had casualties in the past 7 days. The dangers of the jungle have always been unexpected. 1 member died from mosquito bites, 2 people died from venomous snakes, and 5 people died from strange vines. The vines seem similar to ordinary vines, but in fact, like the devouring bees, they live by devouring the flesh and blood of passing creatures. At first, no one cared about it. As a result, it caused the Greycoat Army's greatest casualties in the past few days. In the end, if it hadn't been greedy and followed behind, it would have been discovered and killed by Tang Nun. Fortunately, the dangerous days finally came to an end, and the Greycoat Army was lucky enough to walk out of the jungle. After a while, the main force followed from behind. After seeing the mountains in the distance, many people suddenly knelt on the ground and cried with joy. When they were chased into the jungle by the pursuers, they didn't have much hope. They didn't expect that in the end they would come out safely. This was too dreamy for them. After a while, when everyone calmed down, the team set off again. As for the target, it was naturally the mountains in front of them. Gradually, the trees became thinner. A winding mountain road appeared in front of everyone. However, at this moment, Tang In and the other 2, who were currently the scouts of the team, stopped and stood in front of an inconspicuous stone. This stone was found by the side of the mountain road. At a glance, no one would pay attention to it. However, if it fell into the eyes of someone, such as any Greycoat Army scout, they would see that the stone was placed in a particular way. Upon closer inspection, they would see that there were a few man-made carvings on the side. After Tang and took the job of the scout, Darren told him some of the secret signals of the Greycoat Army. These carvings mean to ask for help, right? These carvings on the stone were one of the secret signals commonly used by the Greycoat Army. Various carvings represented different meanings. For example, the 3X lines in front of them meant that an ally was in trouble ahead and reinforcements were needed. Michaud, go and tell Darren about this situation. After all, it was the first time he had seen this secret signal, so Tang In decided to find Darren to confirm it first. Yes. Soon, Darren led the team and rushed over. That's right, this is a distress signal. These carvings, it should be for not too long ago. Darren came over and touched the carvings a few times. He quickly confirmed the message left behind. Borg looked into the distance and frowned. There's only one way out of this mountain range. It's not easy to escape. If they fall here, I'm afraid it's not going to end well for this team. Forget it. We have to go and take a look to be at ease. Darren's eyes were filled with determination. He quickly said, Brother Tang, I still have to ask you to scout the situation in front. I'll lead the team and follow behind quickly. Okay. Tang In nodded. Michaud, come with me. David, you advance with the team. Under Tang In's training, Michaud's and Darren's talents were gradually developed. Michaud's speed was obviously faster than David's. The two of them rushed out like arrows from the bow, heading straight for the mountain range in front of them. The mountain road was rugged and winding, and it was very difficult for ordinary people to walk. But for Twain and Michaud, it was as if they were running on flat ground. When Michaud trained in the jungle, he always ran around the messy trees, so he was able to stop and change directions without any pressure. Under the rapid speed of the two of them, the mountain range was soon in front of them. After entering the mountain range, The two of them climbed to the top of a mountain. Then they looked into the distance and memorized the winding mountain road in their hearts. Then they followed the straight direction and went directly over the mountains. This kind of continuous uphill and downhill was undoubtedly very tiring. Not long after, Misho's breathing became rapid. Tang ignored him. He knew very well how endurance this subordinate of his had. When he was tested to carry rolling wood, he directly reached the limit of his body before failing. Now that he had personally trained him, it was natural that he was better than before. After the two of them ran for nearly an hour and a half, Tang suddenly stopped and then grabbed Misho, who couldn't stop in time. The two of them held their breaths at the same time. In an instant, the sound of weapons clashing could be heard. Over there, Tang rushed out to the left again. Misho took a few deep breaths and followed after him. Gradually, the sound of weapons clashing became louder and louder. Tang was delighted. As long as they were still fighting, it meant that they were not dead. This trip was not in vain. Finally, the two of them crouched on a hill and saw the scene of a fierce battle. On one side, there were about 600 spear infantrymen dressed in armor. On the other side, there were all kinds of weapons mixed together, and there were only about 200 people. It was obvious at a glance who the Gray Coat Army was. Right now, they were in a bad situation. Not only were they at a disadvantage in numbers, but their team was also closely followed. Chapter 150. The fierce battle in the valley continued. Rows of spearmen pushed forward layer by layer, forcing the Gray Coat Army in front of them back into the valley. Although the Gray Coat Army tried their best to resist, they suffered from the great disparity in numbers and inferior armor. In the end, they had no choice but to leave behind several corpses as they retreated step by step. Westside, damn it. Sent a group of people up there. Damn it. Who told you to break in? Maintain the formation and push them back in. A burly man in bronze chainmail oversaw the overall situation from the rear. From time to time, he would give out orders to correct the spearmen's attack formation. Under his command, the Gray Coat Army had almost no chance. The outcome was set. Anyone who watched this small-scale battle would have such a judgment. Good brothers put in more effort and completely crushed them. The burly man was in the middle of the battle and naturally understood the situation better. Seeing that victory was in sight, he couldn't help but laugh. Brothers are tired. Why don't we let them rest for a while? A voice came from behind. Are you King kidding me? After cursing casually, the burly man suddenly froze. Who are you? Sir, be careful. Alarms sounded one after another, but it was already too late. Everyone stop. A long roar enveloped the battlefield. Just as this small-scale battle was in full swing, an unforeseen event suddenly occurred. When the soldiers turned around in surprise, they saw a young man in black reaching out his right hand and casually placing it on the neck of their commander. Yes, there was a dagger in his hand. Who is this? When did he come? The soldiers of the Brand Kingdom were divided into teams of 10, a platoon of 50, and a platoon of 100. The leader of this kind of troop was usually the one leading the troops. In every battle, he would charge and break through the enemy lines. However, after a team of more than 100 people, the leader could be considered an official. At this time, they would usually retreat to the back of the team and begin to command the battle. Only at the end of the battle would they rush forward to satisfy their cravings and make a show of it. This was not bureaucratic, it was a necessity of the battle. After all, a battle between soldiers was not like a bandit robbery. There had to be someone to command. Moreover, it was unavoidable for a general to die in battle. If such a commanding officer were to accidentally die in battle, wouldn't that be a huge blow to their morale? This time, there were a total of 600 soldiers besieging them. The burly man naturally chose to command from the rear. He was also protected by his personal guards. The current situation of the war was not at the point where he needed to send his personal guards to fight with their lives on the line. But even so, someone still managed to get close to him without making a sound. How could this not cause people to be inexplicably shocked? Then, he felt his hair stand on end. The fierce fighting on the battlefield fell silent at this moment. The Greycoat army was a little confused when they saw the pikemen suddenly stop attacking. However, this was undoubtedly a good thing for them. A moment later, the formation that was about to collapse was quickly put together again. Needless to say, this black-clothed young man was naturally Tang In. Based on the Greycoat army's current situation, they definitely wouldn't be able to wait for Darren and the others to come to their rescue. At this moment, the burly man who looked like a commanding officer kept shouting orders from behind, and the dozens of personal guard beside him were focused on the fierce battle in front of them. Therefore, Tang indecisively made his move. Relying on his ghost-like movements, he instantly flashed over and took down the burly man. Cough, cough, excuse me. Tang held the burly man hostage and walked forward. That whatever light God said that there must be love and harmony between people. The weather is so good, why don't we all disperse? Awkward silence. The soldiers looked at each other. Did the light God say something like that? Hey, if you don't say anything, it means that you agree. Hurry up and go back to your homes and find your mothers. After a few steps, the soldiers surrounded him with their spears. What are you doing? Tang stopped in his tracks with an innocent expression. You don't even listen to the light God's words? Whatever people do, the God is watching everyone. Gasp! The burly man came back to his senses and took a deep breath. He shouted, "Where's the vice captain? I order you." Stop! I'll chop you to death. In the midst of the crowd's agitation, Tang In withdrew the knife from his thigh and whispered in the burly man's ear, "You'd better not talk. That person, that's you, don't move. Don't think I didn't see it. Chop me to death? Do you think I'm scared?" With an angry tone, Tang In carried the burly man all the way to the front of the soldier. The surrounding soldiers raised their spears, but when they saw the dagger pressed against his neck, they didn't dare to make a move. Stand still. Bang! The soldier was kicked in the calf and fell to the ground. Then Tang stepped on him a few more times. The soldier held his head and kept groaning. Phew! Tang let out a long breath and smacked his lips. TSK, did you see that? Don't blame me for not reminding you. Don't scare people anymore. When I'm fierce, even I'm afraid of myself. Vice Captain, what the hell are you doing? The burly man who was being carried around like a chicken roared. Fuck, everyone listen to my orders, ah? The vice captain's order was interrupted by a scream. The knife had pierced through the armor and pierced the lower abdomen. You think carefully before you speak. My hands are prone to trembling, and when there's danger, they will tremble even more. Don't attack for me. This time, Tang Un's nagging was interrupted by the vice captain's roar. The surrounding soldiers immediately gritted their teeth and handed out their spears. Fuck, what a pity. Can't I delay any longer? Haha, be careful. In the reminder, Tang suddenly spun the burly man around him like a windmill. Damn it, be careful, sir. Puff, puff, although they received the order when they actually attacked. Seeing Tang's actions, the soldiers cursed and retreated. Most of the spears were withdrawn, but not all soldiers could freely control their attacks, so there were still 2 spears that pierced the burly man's body. Ha! I told you to be careful. In the long laughter, Tang swung the burly man and sprinted forward quickly. The soldiers on the road were in a dilemma. No one could guarantee that their spears would pierce the damn man in black, and it was their commander. The commander is already dead. Attack, attack. A sorrowful roar came from behind. The soldiers were stunned, but they immediately reacted. The commander's skills were not low, so it was impossible for him to be swung around by others. Moreover, when the 2 spears pierced him, the commander did not have any reaction at all. Bingo correct. Tang snapped his fingers, and then threw the body of the burly man out. As a reward, I'll give it to you. Bang. Just now, he had already walked a long distance. Now, taking advantage of the body, knocking over a group of soldiers, Tang Un's figure flashed and finally rushed out of the encirclement of the soldiers. He sped toward the gray coat army. When the latter saw Tang In kill the commander of the soldiers, they naturally knew that he was a friend and not an enemy. A gap quickly opened in the formation, allowing Tang In to enter. Then, a middle-aged man covered in blood greeted him. "Don't say anything, listen to me. Quickly retreat into the valley now and guard the entrance. Reinforcements will arrive in an hour and a half." Okay. The middle-aged man was also a decisive person. He quickly ordered the troops to retreat. Tang In turned around and looked at the soldiers who were charging toward him. He sighed, "I've done my best, Darren. Now it's up to you. If you like this work, you're welcome to come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation." Chapter 151. As Tang In expected, the pursuing gray coat army turned back in less than 10 minutes. Darren and the middle-aged man walked at the front of the team, talking as they walked over. "Brother Tang, let me introduce you. This is Mu Tua, the captain of the gray coat army." Darren waved his hand. Tang In bowed. "Captain Mu Tua, nice to meet you." The middle-aged man called Mu Tua suddenly bowed. "Brother Tang, thank you so much this time. I, Mu Tua, am useless and implicated my brothers. If you didn't save us this time, we would have died." "Captain Muta you are." Tang In hurriedly went forward to help the middle-aged man up. He smiled bitterly and said, "I am also a member of the Gray Coat Army. Seeing a friend in danger, shouldn't I help?" "Yes, Mutua. Don't blame yourself too much. It's not your fault this time." Darren comforted him. "It's already not easy for you to lead the team and run so far under the pursuit of the Song Yen spearmen." "Song Yen?" Tang In was stunned, then nodded thoughtfully. No wonder. Tang In now knew that there were three major armies in the north: Zichen, Thunder, and Song Yen. These armies had been resisting the attacks of the northern wilderness tribes for many years. Their strength was ranked at the top of the brand's military establishment. When Darren and the others ambushed the supply team, the battle became much simpler after Tang and killed the other party's commanding officer. But this time, they killed the burly man again, but the result was that the spearmen's desire for revenge was aroused. They fought a fierce battle with the Gray Coat Army at the entrance of the valley. Even when they retreated in the end, they didn't panic at all. They didn't let Darren and the others gain any advantage. From this, it could be seen that this was a real army that was good at fighting. "What's the use of running so far?" Mu Tua grabbed his hair and squatted down. None of the relatives in the team ran out when they were ambushed. None of them ran out. These sons of asterisk cheese. If it wasn't for the vice captain sacrificing his life to cover the retreat, we wouldn't have had a chance to break out. Now that so many of our brothers have died, I have let the vice captain down, I have let them down. As he finished speaking, the burly man, who had not made a sound when the spear pierced his body, was already tearing up. Tang In and Darren looked at each other and fell silent. At this time, words of comfort were useless. "Captain." Mutuar raised his head in a daze and saw a burly man limping over while dragging his injured leg. "Captain, you've never let us down. We've never blamed you. I'm sure our dead brothers won't either. If it weren't for you leading everyone to break out of the encirclement, we would have died long ago. Now that we are still alive, aren't we waiting for you to continue leading us to take revenge and crush those bastard balls?" Mutuo's mouth moved, but he could not form a complete sentence. "Captain, stand up and avenge us. I'm going to smash these sons of bitches." A large group of injured people shouted from afar. F***CK. Mutua slammed the ground and suddenly stood up, roaring, "Everyone, don't worry. Mutua, swear here that as long as I'm alive, I'll avenge our dead brothers. If I violate this oath, I'll die." As soon as he finished speaking, the curved blade turned around. Tang Un's sleeve moved and the dagger slipped out. But then he sighed softly and did not make a move. Hiss! Blood flashed, and a pinky was thrown out amidst everyone's exclamations. Silence. Then, "Revenge! Revenge! Revenge!" Hot-blooded roars echoed in the valley and soared into the sky. The morale of the troops had been boosted, but they definitely could not take revenge now. Now, the first thing this Gray Coat army had to do was to get rid of their pursuers. The commander of the Blue Flame Legion was not a fool. After the spearmen went back to report, what awaited the Gray Coat army was naturally an even more meticulous encirclement. Everyone dug a pit on the hill and buried the bodies of their companions. As for the corpses of the soldiers, they were naturally thrown here for the birds and beasts to bite. If they occasionally found someone who was still breathing, of course, they would expressionlessly stab him. After discussing with Mutaw, Darren finally decided to go to the 100,000 Mountains to find the main force. Previously, when the Gray Coat army received the news of the encirclement, they immediately scattered and moved. If it was in the past, it would be more than enough to deal with those second-line soldiers. But now that the three armies had made a move, if they continued to do so, they would only disperse their forces and be defeated one by one. After a few minutes of silence in front of the hill, the two Gray Coat army merged and hurried on their way. Their current location was not far from the 100,000 Mountains. As long as they passed through this mountain range and circled around a city, they would be considered to have entered the territory of the 100,000 Mountains. At noon, the Gray Coat army encountered a checkpoint with more than 100 people on the mountain path. This checkpoint was set up very well. It happened to be in the middle of two steep mountain peaks. If they bypassed it, not to mention the difficulty of climbing, just the time wasted was not something the Gray Coat army could afford. After observing for a while, everyone decided to forcefully break through. Although it was not as sudden as a sneak attack, they still had the advantage in numbers. Therefore, after less than half an hour of fighting, after leaving behind a mess, the Gray Coat army successfully broke through and continued to rush forward. At this moment, in the Zechen Legion's marching camp, Laer Fu sat quietly in the middle of the tent and read the information. At the side, the group of students from a military academy were currently facing a huge map and discussing intensely. The terrain here is hidden. There must be a Gray Coat army hiding here. I think it's possible here. Look at the complicated environment. If we're surrounded, there are many directions to choose from when we escape. You better shut up. Didn't Marshal Z just teach you a lesson last time? Huh. At this moment, the middle-aged adjutant opened the tent curtain and walked in. The students immediately surrounded him and bowed. Greetings, Brigadier General. How is it? Did you find the Gray Coat army? The adjutant shook his head and said no. Sigh. A student slammed his hand and said anxiously, "What should we do? It's been 4 days, and we still haven't found anything." It turned out that after the meeting in the camp, all the troops scattered and went to the areas they were in charge of. After the Zechen Legion came here, Laer Fu gave the students the choice to search. As long as they pointed out the location and explained the reason, the soldiers would go and search. At first, these students were very confident. They patted their chests and promised that they would find all the Gray Coat army here. However, after a few days, none of the locations they pointed out were correct. This made the students anxious. Although the various legions seemed to be harmonious on the surface, the conflicts in the dark had never stopped. Now that the Zechen Legion had not found anything because of them, how could they accept this? Why don't we do a web search? A student suggested. Idiot, with such a big commotion, the enemy would have run away. Of course, this was only one of the reasons. If they did a web search, the soldiers could do it. Then what was the use of them? The future military generals of the Brand Kingdom. Then what do you think we should do? The curtain was pulled open again. This time a soldier came in. General, a group of Gray Coat army has entered our defense area. What? Really? The students were elated. It was not easy. Finally, someone came to them voluntarily. Laer Fu raised his head and looked at them quietly. Silence. Although his gaze was calm, there was an imposing aura. Continue. The soldier said, behind them, there are 500 spearmen and 500 swordsmen from the Blue Flame Legion chasing after them. The students looked at each other. They were happy for nothing. So it was someone else's cup of tea. Laer Fu stood up and walked to the map. After looking at it for a while, he waved his hand and said, block them. Block who? A student opened his mouth and asked. Layer Fu did not answer. He had returned to the table and was reading the report. At this moment, the adjutant walked out and explained, "It's the soldiers from the Blue Flame Legion." Although the students had already guessed it based on their tone. But after hearing it, they were still stunned. As mentioned earlier, the various legions seemed to be friendly on the surface. For example, although the Gray Coat Army was in the Purple Star Legion's defensive zone, the Blue Flame Legion's people were already following behind them. It was obvious that they had their eyes on them first. Logically speaking, even if the Zechen Legion did not help, they would not cause trouble. But now, the general had sent people to block the Blue Flame Legion's path. Wasn't this a blatant robbery? It seemed a little tasteless. The students looked at Layer Fu, who was sitting quietly. Was the general panicking? Otherwise, why would he do such a shameless thing? If you like this work, you're welcome to come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 152. Under the faint blue light, the man and woman in the corner of the tavern were very close to each other. The middle-aged man retracted his gaze. Beautiful madam, names are just symbols for us. Well, if you want, you can call me Arthur. Okay, Mr. Arthur. The gorgeous woman followed his advice and tapped the wine glass with her finger. Sorry, this is the first time I've done something like this. Will you do anything for me, as long as I pay? It's just killing, madam. The middle-aged man reminded her, and then said, and it depends on the strength of the target and the difficulty of the assassination. Simply put, if you pay 500 gold coins, I can only help you kill the target below 500 gold coins. Understood. The gorgeous woman nodded. That should be enough. The target this time doesn't have any strength and the difficulty is very low. Then there's no problem. The middle-aged man breathed a sigh of relief and said confidently. The gorgeous woman didn't seem to agree or disagree. However, the killing method this time is a bit special. So I need to find a brave assassin. Madam, the middle-aged man looked up. Believe me, I'm not only professional, but also professional. Huh. The woman heard him and laughed. The fine crow's feet at the corner of her eyes were tightly knitted together. At this moment, a teasing voice suddenly came from the side. Professional? I don't think so. The middle-aged man turned his head in shock. The two of them were talking very softly just now and paid special attention to their surroundings. Where did this sudden voice come from? The middle-aged man tensed up and looked at the ordinary-looking young man beside him. He swore that there was no one there just a moment ago. After staring for a while, the middle-aged man relaxed his shoulders and asked tentatively, "Are you in the same profession?" "Kind of." The young man spread his hands. The gorgeous woman calmed down and looked at the scene in front of her with interest. "Do you know?" The middle-aged man pointed to his seat and said with a dangerous tone, "A few minutes ago, there was another person sitting here. Well, he's also in the same profession. Do you know where he is now?" "Oh, where?" "He should be in a dark corner, treating his wound. But no matter how he bandages it, he won't be able to reattach a broken finger." The middle-aged man placed his hand on the table. "Now, do you think I'm professional enough?" "'Tis TSK. It sounds a bit professional." The young man took a step forward and narrowed his eyes. "But what does that have to do with me?" The middle-aged man took a deep breath and said, "What a pity. Haha, there's no need for you to worry. The waves behind drive on the waves before." The middle-aged man sighed. "Young man, let me give you one last piece of advice. You have plenty of opportunities, so why do you have to fight with me now?" "Well, you know, the waves in front will always be smashed to death by the waves behind." The young man took another step forward to the table and shrugged. The gorgeous woman laughed again. After the laughter ended, the corner fell into dead silence. The blue light flowed, and it was as quiet as the surface of the sea. However, the temper of the sea was never docile. Countless undercurrents were surging beneath its seemingly quiet surface, ready to erupt at any moment. Suddenly, the sound of a wine glass hitting the table came from somewhere. Clink! It was very light, but it was enough to cause a storm. The middle-aged man moved and instantly approached the young man. His palm gently swept across the young man's throat. If it were not for the imperceptible cold light between his fingers, this action would be like an old friend patting the shoulder to greet him. The young man raised his left hand like a phantom and welcomed the warm arm. Then he lifted his right leg slightly and blocked the middle-aged man's sinister knee. Bang! There was a slight collision sound, and the young man's knees separated. The middle-aged man saw that his plan was seen through. His palm, which was originally a feint, trembled slightly and revealed a cold light. It stabbed at the young man's vital points like a few snakes. Ding, 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 attack, defense, attack, attack, attack. In the trivial collision sound, the cold light flickered in the narrow space. The palms of both sides intertwined like butterflies, blocking and retreating at high speed without a trace of wind. In a short 10 seconds, the middle-aged man's face was filled with shock and anger because he found that he could no longer attack. The young man stepped forward again. Palm strike, block. Leg attack, block. Blade light, block, can't block. The middle-aged man took a step back. With one step back, he stepped into hell. The blood-red light in front of him suddenly surged. The blue light receded and turned into a boundless sea of blood. Shocked, the middle-aged man made complicated hand seals and fought back, laying down layers of red light. Hiss! A palm suddenly passed through the red light and pressed on the middle-aged man's shoulder. Bang! The red light shattered, and the middle-aged man was forced to sit back on the bench. His right palm was pressed directly on the table, and then a cold light hit him. The middle-aged man's body suddenly froze. He looked down and saw a dented dagger in his fingers. The pressure of employment is great. You need to be careful when changing careers, Jack. The mocking voice sounded again. Damn, Arthur. Looking at the familiar dagger, the middle-aged man blurted out in surprise. Huh. The young man, oh no, Tang Yin withdrew the dagger and chuckled. Using my name and the disguise mold I gave you to kill people. I think you're tired of living. Jack laughed awkwardly and then said, Hey, Arthur, your disguise is getting better and better. Without a doubt, this was a very unskilled change of topic. However, Tang Yin was not in the mood to expose him. It's okay. In fact, Tang Yin did not disguise himself this time, but Jack had never seen his real face. In addition, he had seen Tang Yin's various realistic disguises. Naturally, he subconsciously thought that Tang Yin's disguise skills were getting better and better. Aren't you a thief? How did you become an assassin? How did you come to the north? It's a long story. We'll talk about it later. Jack first apologized to the gorgeous woman, then pulled Tang Yin aside. Brother, I'm tight on money now. It's not easy to get this mission in the Thieves' Union. Arthur, we're acquaintances. You won't cut off my business, right? Sorry, brother. I'm even tighter on money. Besides, this doesn't seem to be cutting off. Didn't you just get rid of an assassin? Ahem. Our relationship is different. Jack laughed shamelessly. Tang Yin sighed helplessly. Jack, I'm sorry. This time, I really need the money urgently. Jack rolled his eyes twice. Then how about we split it in half? We'll do this mission together. How about it? I have to ask the employer first, right? Tang Yin hesitated. Wait a moment. Jack then turned to the gorgeous woman and explained the situation. The woman glanced at Tang Yin and pondered for a moment. My mission doesn't have any requirements for the number of people. Done, huh? Jack laughed. No hurry. At this time, Tang Yin also chuckled. I can let you join, but you have to give me something. Damn, Arthur, you treat your brother like this. Tang Yin waved his hand. Don't worry. Wait for me to finish. I want the ocean tide dough chi cultivation technique. Just make a copy and give it to me. This was Tang Yin's true goal. David and Michaud desperately needed the dough chi cultivation technique. When he was in Lion City, he and Jack had stolen an advanced dough chi cultivation technique from Austin Castle. However, he didn't need it at that time, so he gave it to Jack. Jack blinked and immediately agreed. No problem. Okay, deal. Two sirs, this isn't the place to talk. Why don't we go to my house first? At this time, the gorgeous woman stood up. Your house? Jack was surprised. Yes, and this mission will be done at my house. Okay. Since it was related to the mission, the two naturally wouldn't object. Then let's go. My carriage is parked outside. The gorgeous woman led the way out of the inn. Just as they walked out of the inn, suddenly, dang, 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 a distant bell sound reverberated in the sky above Shanghai City. At this time, the woman stopped and placed her hands in front of her chest. She closed her eyes and prayed. This is? Tang Yin looked at Jack in confusion. These few days is God's grace day. Every day at noon, the church in the city will ring the bell. Our employer is a believer of the Temple of Light. Tang Yin nodded and looked at the quiet city because of the sound of the bell. Temple of Light? Hee, it might not be the Temple of Light. If you like this work, you're welcome to come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. Chapter 153. One more time, a raccoon begging for votes. The carriage drove for about half an hour on the roads of Shanghai City and finally stopped in front of a rather exquisite manor. Tang Yin and Jack got off the carriage and looked at the towering door in front of them in a daze. Come in. Why are you standing there? The beautiful woman turned around and asked in surprise. From here. Jack asked uncertainly. And? If not from the door, where should we go? Tang Yin and Jack looked at each other and were speechless. Please, you should at least go in through the back door or something. This killing was too arrogant. Probably understanding the two's intentions, the woman explained, Don't worry, I've given the servants in the house a day off. Now, no one is walking around. They nodded, so it was like that. The two followed the woman into the manor through the front door. Passing through the wide square and the clean front yard, the three of them arrived at the living room. The soft cushions under their feet made them feel like they were walking on clouds, and the burning fireplace on the east wall made the room unusually warm. The grand guest table, luxurious wooden chairs, various framed portraits hanging on the wall. All of this showed how wealthy the owner was. Do you want some fruit? The woman pointed at the fruit platter on the table. Haha, thank you. Jack picked up a red fruit. After tossing it a few times, his fingers moved slightly, and, under the cold light, the thin skin fell off continuously. When the fruit fell, the skin had been completely removed, revealing the white and even flesh inside. The beautiful woman's eyes lit up, and she raised her eyebrows. Wait a moment. I'll go boil some water and make some tea. No need to go through so much trouble. Yes, because you might want to listen to a story later. Saying so, the woman walked to the back of the living room. Tang, and opened his mouth. Was she here to kill people? Why did it feel like she was a guest? Crack. Jack took a bite of the fruit, chewed it a few times, and said casually, You assassins are treated pretty well. I've been a thief for so many years, but I've never seen anyone properly invite me to the main hall. Because you came here uninvited. And that makes sense. Before Jack finished eating the fruit, the woman had already brought the tea set over and took the tea leaves from the innermost table in the living room. Bang! The lid rolled on the table and finally fell to the floor. I'm sorry, I don't do this kind of thing often. The woman shrugged apologetically. A moment later, 3 white porcelain teacups were brought over. Please. The woman raised her teacup and gestured. Thank you. Jack picked up a teacup and brought it to his mouth. After a pause, he raised it to Tang Yin. Cheers. Can you be a little more cultured? This is tea. Tang Yin chuckled and clinked his cup with Jack's before taking a sip. Putting down the teacup, Tang Yin said, Okay, now can you tell me the target of the assassination? Sure, but do you mind listening to a story first? The gorgeous woman stroked her hair and asked. Of course. I've already drunk the tea. Yes, thank you. The woman smiled. Then, her eyes became blurry, as if she was lost in her memories. 10 years, 8 months, and 41 days ago. Yes, the weather was very good that day, and the wind was very gentle. A young girl was strolling on the streets to buy some pretty clothes. Suddenly, a A speeding carriage lost its footing, and the entire carriage crashed into her. That young girl was scared stiff and stood there without moving. Fortunately, a young man passed by and saved her. At that moment, she remembered very clearly that in his embrace, she felt a sense of security that she had never felt before. The man fractured his hand to save the young girl. She was very grateful and went to see him every day. After a few months of interaction, the young girl had feelings for him. After the man recovered, the two of them often went shopping, hiking, and hiking. That period of time was really beautiful. But the good times didn't last long. The young girl's father soon found out about this. The young girl's family was rich, and the man was just a commoner. So, her father locked her in a room and didn't allow her to go out and meet the man. The man was very brave. That night, he climbed over the wall and secretly met with her. After a few times, he was caught by her family and was beaten badly. The young girl was very angry and started to go on a hunger strike. She was the only daughter in the family. So, after a few days, her family compromised and agreed to their relationship. The condition was that the man had to come to her house. He agreed and came to the young girl's house to learn business from her father. He was very smart and worked very hard. Soon, he won the young girl's father's favor. 5 years later, the young girl married the man. Life after marriage was very sweet. He was very good to her. She always thought that it was her luck to be able to meet him. Until 2 years later, the young girl's family's caravan was robbed and her parents died in the hands of the robbers. Gradually, the man who became the head of the family had more and more social engagements. He often didn't go home. At first, she was very understanding and very supportive. Until one day, she saw him hugging a woman on the street. She was very angry and quarreled with him. She thought that by doing this, the man who had always loved her would change his mind. But he was even more unwilling to go home. After that, life was terrible. Cold War quarreling. The man would even bring some women home. He even started to beat her. At that time, she still had a glimmer of hope in her heart. Maybe he would wake up one day, maybe he would have enough fun and come back to her. But a few days ago, the man came home smelling of alcohol. She helped him to bed and rest. He suddenly started to talk drunkenly. It turned out that the car accident that year was carefully planned by him. It turned out that he had told the robbers the route of the caravan where her parents were killed. It turned out that he had never loved her. In the quiet living room, there was dust in the light. A faint voice, like a sigh, surrounded the room. Tang In and Jack looked at each other. They could naturally tell that the heroine of this story should be the woman in front of them. Ahem, madam, we are very sorry. Yes, it is quite regretful. The woman's expression returned to calmness. She said in a melancholy tone. Jack nodded slightly. So, the person we want to kill is that damn man. Where is he? The woman shook her head. Kill him? How can that be? I love him so much. No. Jack opened his mouth. Then who is it? Me, the woman said indifferently. Tang In and Jack were dumbfounded. Is this woman crazy? I am not crazy. The woman's senses were very sensitive. She said softly, he is sleeping in the bedroom behind us. I have drugged him, so he will not wake up for now. I have made a noose on the beam in front of him. Yes, I have calculated the angle. He will see that place when he wakes up. I will hang myself there. I have heard that when people hang themselves, their eyes will bulge out and their tongues will become very long. It is very scary, but that is not enough. After a pause, the woman pointed at her chest. So, what you need to do is to cut open this place and place my internal organs in various places in the bedroom. Pull out my intestines until they reach his blanket. Smear the wall with my blood. Pull out my tongue as long as possible. Cut my face into fish scales. The key is my eyes. I am worried that I will not be able to control myself. So, you need to adjust the angle of my eyeball so that he will open his eyes and look at me. Yes, that is all I can think of for now. You are the experts in this area. When the time comes, I will need your help. Please. Tang In and Jack were frozen. They could not even move an inch. A chill ran down their spines, and when it reached the top of their heads, it became numb. Of course, The two of them had seen dead people before. A few days ago, Tangan was on the battlefield, and he had seen many people who were missing limbs. Some were even cut in half at the waist. However, after listening to the woman's calm and sincere words, they still felt a chill run down their spines. They could not control themselves. Jack tried to clear his throat. He felt that there was something blocking his throat, making it hard for him to breathe. You agree? That is great. The woman looked happy. I have seen your cutting skills when you were peeling fruits. It is very good. I will leave the fish scales on my face to you. Ah, Jack was shocked, and he waved his hands frantically. No, no, no. I just have an itchy throat. I am afraid that I am unable to help you with your task. You should find someone else. If she did that, the man would be greatly stimulated. It was very likely that he would go crazy. Even if he did not go crazy, as long as he closed his eyes, this scene would appear in his mind. But wouldn't this be a nightmare for the person who carried it out? Ha! The woman threw out a box. Here is 1,000 gold notes. Please help me. This is really not a matter of money. As expected, you are unwilling. The woman's expression dimmed. Then she looked up. I am sorry. I put poison in the tea just now. I swallowed the antidote when I took the tea set. There is a layer of wax on the outside. As long as you cut open my stomach in half an hour, you can take out the antidote. I am really sorry. Tang In and Jack looked at each other with complicated expressions on their faces. The woman bowed and apologized. Then she got up and walked to the back. Please follow me. The bedroom was not far from the living room. After passing through the main building, the three of them arrived in front of the attic. They went upstairs and pushed the door open. This was probably not the master bedroom. The space was not very big. This greatly increased the sense of horror after the incident. After all, this place could be smeared with blood. There was a man lying on the bed. He was about 30 years old and had a handsome face. Diagonally above him, there was a red rope, and below it was a small chair. Next, I will leave it to you. The woman bowed. Tang touched his nose, and Jack scratched his head. The woman was not surprised that the two of them did not react. After all, the antidote was in her stomach. She stepped on the chair and looked at the man on the bed. Then, she stretched her head out without hesitation. Bang! The chair collapsed. Whoosh! Bang! The red rope broke, and the woman fell to the ground. Before she could wake up, she was hit on the back of her neck and fell to the ground. The woman had used every possible means to create the tragic effect she wanted. However, Tang In and Jack, one was an assassin and the other was a thief. How could they not smell such a strong poison? It seemed that they had drunk it. In fact, it was just a smokescreen. The tea had already entered their sleeves. Jack sighed and said, Damn it, I'll just be an honest thief. You assassins are not something normal people can do. Tang was also speechless. He shook his head and said, This is also an accident. It is also my first time encountering this. Then what we do now? What else can we do? You have saved her, so we can only leave. Oh, where are you going? Wait, I will be back soon. Jack quickly rushed out of the bedroom. In less than a minute, Jack walked in with a teapot. What are you doing? Taking care of this bastard on behalf of God. Jack opened the man's mouth and poured the entire pot of poisonous tea. Clapping his hands, Jack threw away the teapot. Done. Well, this counts as completing the mission. I can accept the money with peace of mind. Tang and picked up the woman. Okay, let's go. The two of them left the bedroom and put the woman back in the warm living room. Before leaving, Tang In could not help but look back and sigh. Women are not to be trifled with. Jack nodded his head like a chick pecking at rice. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Chidian. Come to vote for me. Your support is my biggest motivation. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.